Midoriya's heart jumped into his throat as he asked the question. Can someone like me? He shook, but suppressed the quivering in his fingers. This was his chance to ask his hero. Without a quirk, Midoriya pressed his eyes shut, unable to look at the symbol of peace. Be a hero? The scene ran through Midoriya Izuku's mind again and again as he ran through the city streets, burnt notebook in hand. He sniffed hard in an effort to stop the tears that were already flowing and allowed his legs to carry him through the streets until he didn't recognize where he was anymore. He didn't know how long he had been running, and at this point, he didn't care. No. He'd finally heard confirmation from his hero himself. You can't be a hero. Someone like Deku, quirkless and powerless, could never be a hero. I guess when All Might tells you, that's really all there is to it. Midoriya choked, not watching where he was going. In fact, his legs carried him without thinking until he was off the sidewalks, off the roadways, and a decent way from civilization. As he wiped his eyes and caught his breath, he looked around and realized he didn't recognize where he was, or how he came to be surrounded by trees. There's not a forest around here, is there? He asked to no one in particular. He was met with silence at the inquiry, and Deku looked around for any signs of life. Hello? He called into the woods. A few animals skittered and rustled the leaves around him, but there was no answer. However, in the distance, he could see a light from a clearing. Maybe that's where I came in from. Deku wandered through a thin, beaten path towards the light, a little embarrassed that he had allowed himself to lose track of time and even his location in his breakdown. But as he approached, he realized that this clearing wasn't civilization. No, he had come across a small pond. In the middle of the pond, there was a rock of sorts jutting up from the water, perfectly centered and surrounded by the tall trees of the forest. There, sitting on the rock, was a large hammer of sorts. It was a simple hammer, a rectangular block of some sort of metal, the wooden handle pointing straight up into the sky. In any other circumstance, Midoriya would have felt disappointed, perhaps even fearful that he was lost. Not today. For some reason, that hammer was calling out to him. Not vocally, of course, but something in Deku's chest made his heart flutter. His mind went numb, filled with nothing but a desire to get that hammer. Thoughtlessly, he began wading through the waist-deep water, not minding that he was getting his school uniform dirty, not minding as the bottom of his backpack skimmed the surface. Midoriya Izuku climbed the rock with ease and looked down at the rather intimidating weapon. He grabbed the handle, expecting the hammer to feel heavy, but to his shock, he lifted it easily, holding it up to eye level with one hand. Is this a prop or something? He wondered aloud. He ran a finger over the surface of the hammer, which confirmed that it was indeed a solid metal hammer. It was then that a bolt of lightning came crashing from the crystal-clear blue sky and struck the young man dead in the chest. Afterwards, Midoriya was gone. Gone, but not dead. He blinked a few times and gasped. No longer in the mysterious woods, Midoriya found himself in a mysterious hall that stretched taller than any building, stained glass windows all around him. The hall itself was empty, save for one man sitting on a throne at the back of it. The man was far different from any Midoriya had met before. He looked like something out of Viking folklore with a winged helmet, a braided beard, and long blonde hair that was beginning to turn gray. He had a metallic eye patch covering his right eye, and his face was rugged and scarred from many battles. However, at Midoriya's appearance, the Viking looked down at the boy and gave a broad grin. Ah, it appears Mjolnir has finally found someone worthy. Well, what? Midoriya exclaimed. This is a joke, right? Where am I? The Viking stood up. I'm not one for jokes. I've got a rabbit friend. Him and his tree are good at jokes. But you, boy? This is no jest. For you are worthy. You are no longer Midoriya Izuku. I'm not? Midoriya asked. The Viking descended the stairs and shrugged. Well, I mean, no, you're still Midoriya Izuku, but not just that. You have inherited my title. You are the god of thunder. At this, the clapping of thunder was heard outside of the stained glass windows, louder than Midoriya had ever heard it before. The throne room itself shook at the announcement. He flinched, and that's when he saw it. He had, indeed, changed. Holding the hammer, Midoriya's body no longer looked like his one. Even under his school uniform, His lanky body had morphed into a muscular form. Not outlandish, but a body that could only be secured by, say, if he had spent the better part of a year hauling trash off of a beach. The hammer, Mjolnir, sent a tingling force of energy through his entire body. As he marveled at what had happened, the Viking clapped him on the shoulder. Look at you. Back in my day, the Midgardians would say you looked swole. I need to make this quick. I'm Thor, god of thunder. Or I was. But after a few thousand years, I need to retire to focus on running Asgard. That's where we are. I'm not the warrior I used to be. That's where you come in. Midoriya felt like his head had gotten hit by a truck. Or maybe hit by the hammer he was holding. Wait, god of thunder? I'm you now? Asgard. Thor bellowed out a laugh. Of course not. No? I'm me. Look at you. Even with the muscles of an Asgardian god granted by Mjolnir, you're still tiny compared to me. You scrawny boy. We can talk later. It looks like you're needed. Needed? Midoriya exclaimed, more confused the more the god spoke. Needed how? He didn't get an answer. With the wave of his hand, a blast of lightning struck Deku, and he found himself no longer in the halls of Asgard, but in an alleyway. He looked to his hand, still finding Mjolnir clutched tightly in his shaking right palm. But he had no time to question this over the sounds of screaming and explosions. All thoughts were erased from his head as he recognized one of the screams. Kaken. Midoriya peered outside the alleyway and was met with a scene of chaos. The sludge villain All Might had saved him from earlier was running rampant again, and a plethora of pros were all around, but none of them were advancing. Why? He squinted closer and saw. Bakugu was in the thralls of the sludge, the same way Deku had been when he had been saved by All Might. How did he get? Midoriya began, but then it hit him. It was his fault. He had grabbed onto All Might, and he must have knocked the bottle loose from the hero's pocket. I have to do something. He realized, if I don't, Kaken will die. Because of me and my stupid hero fantasies. His legs moved without thinking for another time that day as Midoriya charged forward, but something else did too. He grabbed Mjolnir by its thick, leather strap and spun the hammer around by his side. He could feel something welling up in his chest. The elements, forces of nature, were swelling within his heart. He could feel it. Midoriya grinned widely as pro-heroes shouted for him to get back. He couldn't hear them over the sound of lightning pulsating in his veins. The sludge monstrosity turned to look as he tried to suffocate Bakugu, and for a second his eyes widened in shock. You? For Asgard, Midoriya shouted, turning the hammer so that it was spinning in front of the villain. A pocket of concentrated air surged from Mjolnir, emulating the Texas smash he had seen from All Might earlier in the day. At the force, the villain was pried from Bakugu and the streets, splattering against the side of building with squelch. You little brat, the villain cried, peeling himself from the wall. Bakugu looked up at Midoriya in shock as the green-haired boy lifted his hammer to the sky. From the pouring rain clouds, a bolt of lightning came, as if he called by Deku, and struck Mjolnir. Deku roared, pointing the hammer towards the sludge villain, and blasted him with a bolt of lightning that blinded the entire street. All that could be heard was the sound of his screaming. When the surround crowds and pros regained their sight, the sludge villain was splattered against the ground, unconscious and smoldering. At the sight, even Midoriya's breath seized up in his chest. How? You, Bakuga growled, snapping Deku out of his brief trance. The blonde looked up at him, mixed emotions etched on his face. The most evident were shock, relief, and rage. The two boys looked at each other, to the hammer in Midoriya's hand, and back to each other once more. What did you do, you? That was about all Bakuga managed to get out before they were both pulled aside by paramedics. What did you think you were doing, kid? Are you even licensed for that? You could have gotten killed. Midoriya barely heard the screaming of the pros around him as they admonished him. Unlicensed heroics were frowned upon, he knew, but at the moment it didn't seem to matter. All he could do was stare down at Mjolnir. How did I even know to do that? He looked up and blinked. From the back of the crowd, he could see All Might in his emaciated, weakened form. The two made eye contact, and All Might beamed at him. In that moment, Deku felt his heart swell. No matter what the crowd said, he had done the right thing. In this day, he had been a hero. Unfortunately, the police officer who grabbed his shoulder and spun him around disagreed. "Hey kid, are you licensed to interfere like this?" Midoriya shifted right back into a panicked state. "To be honest, I just kind of found this hammer, and—" The officer walked a few steps away and grabbed his walkie-talkie. "What should we do about the kid?" But as he turned around, a bolt of lightning crashed down onto Midoriya again, blinding everyone. When the light faded, Midoriya Izuku was gone. "Gah! Next time give me a warning," Deku cried, collapsing in the halls of Asgard, at the foot of Thor's throne. The Asgardian roared with laughter. "Well, not like I could shoot you a text when you're talking to the police." Deku caught his breath and stood up, dusting himself off. "Why? No phone." Thor shrugged. "Still, you're a natural. I knew. I knew from the moment I saw you. You were worthy." Deku looked down at the hammer in his hands. "Worthy? But I'm a quirkless nobody." Thor grabbed his shoulders, making Deku jump. "Exactly. Come, sit down." To Midoriya's surprise, Thor sat down on the steps leading up to his throne and beckoned for Midoriya to join him. Deku complied, still wondering if this was some sort of dying dream as he choked to death on sludge. Maybe All Might never saved me. Maybe this is just my brain coping with death. "Back when I would adventure on Midgard Earth, as you call it," Thor explained, "there were not many superpowers. Or quirks, as you call them now. Some of the people who did have these abilities, we rallied together to protect Midgard from those who sought to destroy it. We were called the Avengers." Midoriya jumped to his feet and took a few steps back. "Hold it. The Avengers? Like one of the first ever pro-hero teams. You're that Thor?" Thor puffed out his chest. "The very same. Not to brag, but I was definitely the strongest Avenger." What are you doing?" Thor looked at the boy in confusion as the teen dug a small notebook out of one of his pockets. "WWE learned about you guys in quirk history. 2 even wrote a research paper about whether or not your ability to control lightning was proof of you as an alien or an early quirk emergence. I have so many questions. What is your hammer made of? Do you generate the lightning or command it from the sky? Like, is it inside of you?" "Alien?" Thor scoffed. "I'm Asgardian. Slow down. What differentiates Asgardians from humans? How long is your lifespan? Does that mean Loki is still around?" "Ugh, you're just like Banner," Thor groaned, clasping a hand over Deku's mouth. "Stop nerding out on me. Besides, you wrote the paper. You probably came to some pretty good conclusions." Deku thought back to his own opinion on the paper, that the mighty Thor was just an early emergence of quirks who let power go to his head, and called himself a god out of an ego. He decided not to disclose that. "But, according to our classes, Hulk was—" Midoriya began. "The Hulk was what?" Thor asked, huffily. "The Hulk and Captain Marvel were recorded as the strongest Avengers." Never mind," Deku replied, scratching the back of his neck. "Didn't you disappear hundreds of years ago?" "Yes, well, Asgard got destroyed, blah blah blah. Endless cycle of Ragnarok, blah blah blah." Thor rolled his eye. "Long story short, periodically, Asgard goes through a rebirthing process, and when it came back, the Asgardians came back. My replacement decided she was sick of leading, so here we are." "Ooh," Midoriya replied. "Okay, well, I guess that lines up with my notes. But what does that have to do with me being worthy?" "That's what I had been talking about before you went into science mode," Thor laughed. "Anyway, back then, there weren't many who had the power to stop evil. And now? Now you live in a time where almost everyone has the ability. And the people who are the most able only seem to care about it doing so for coin or fame. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with the glory of battle and the spoils of a fight. But you?" Thor grinned. "You're the only Midgardian whose entire drive revolves around saving others." Midoriya looked down at his own plans, setting Mjolnir down on the step below him. "So you think I'm worthy of being a hero? Because I want to save others?" Thor shook his head. "Not just me, Midoriya. Mjolnir deems whether or not you were worthy. I thought you were worthy, so I put it there, sure, but you're the one who proved it." "Mjolnir thinks I'm worthy." Midoriya sniffed. And then, a tear leaked out of his eye followed by many more. Before he knew it, he grabbed Thor in a hug and bawled. "Thank you, Thor." Hey, stop. You're getting me all wet." Thor gently pushed the smaller boy aside. "You're more emotional than that old man of spiders. Anyway, Don't thank me yet. We'll need to train you. Train me? Deku asked, rubbing his eyes. Won't I get trained at hero school? Thor laughed heartily and clapped Midoriya on the back. What? You swing the hammer around twice and think you can get into some sort of hero school? Don't be daft. You're still an amateur. You, young Midoriya, are going to learn to fight like an Asgardian god of thunder, because starting today, that's who you're going to be. I'll see you tomorrow, young Midoriya. I'll send a lightning bolt for you after your classes. Before Midoriya could ask anything else, Thor clapped again, summoning a lightning bolt that struck Deku. Before he knew it, he was outside of his apartment building, Mjolnir in hand. Deku stared up at his building, then back down at his hammer, and then back up again, trying to process the events of the last hour. 1 hour, 60 minutes, and he had gone from Midoriya, quirkless loser who should kill himself, to Midoriya, god of thunder? I've got to be dreaming, Midoriya muttered to himself. Oi, there you are, you shitty DKU. Or maybe this is a nightmare, Midoriya groaned, inwardly. He turned around to see Bakugo Katsuki marching up to him, a scowl across his face. Or, as Deku liked to call it, his default face. Bakugo stopped in front of Midoriya and paused, looking at the hammer hanging limply at the shorter boy's side. But he shook that off and launched into an angry tirade. I didn't need you to save me today? Okay, Kakin, I believe you, Midoriya replied, rubbing the back of his head. Of course you didn't. Sure. Just stay out of my way. Katsuki screamed. You're still a shitty, useless nerd. Even if you found some stupid support crap. Give me that. Kakin, wait. Deku yelled, but it was too late. Bakugo had grabbed for Mjolnir and pulled it from Midoriya's hands. But something weird happened. The second Midoriya let go, Bakugo lurched forward as the hammer fell to the ground with a massive crash. Ugh, Bakugo grunted, pulling on the handle. Hey, how did you make this so heavy? Bakugo grunted and bent down, grabbing at the hammer with both hands and tugged. Mjolnir, however, did not budge. Kakin, let me see, Deku began, but he was met with an explosion to his chest, which knocked him back a few feet and onto his ass. Bakugo stood up and scowled. If a weak little shit like you can lift this, I should be able to. Bakugo squatted down and tugged on Mjolnir once more, to no avail. Deku stood up and smiled, despite himself. Watching Bakugo struggle with the weapon, when usually everything came so easily to him, made Midoriya chuckle. Slowly, he reached a hand toward Mjolnir. But when he opened his palm, another curious thing happened. Mjolnir lifted from the ground, flipped over and flew straight into Deku's hand in a second flat. Even better, when it flipped upright, it bonked Bakugo right in the nose and sent him back onto his ass. Deku wrapped his fingers around Mjolnir's handle and grinned. Ow! Bakugo cried, clutching his nose with both hands. A small trickle of blood seeped out. What did you do to my nut? Midoriya smiled down at his hammer and gave it a light toss into the air, flipping it once and catching it by the handle again. It's my hammer, Kakin. He turned, giving his childhood friend a small wave. See you tomorrow. Chapter 3, The Big Exam. Midoriya stood outside the building for his examination, staring up at it as his feet drug underneath him. This was it. Today was the day he'd find out if he had the power to be a hero. Despite all his training, he still couldn't quell the butterflies in his stomach as he approached. Not helping was the fact that he hadn't slept well at all the night before. He kept having the same dream all week, that he would wake up, and that Mjolnir was gone. In the dream, he was no longer worthy, and he went back to being a quirkless nobody, a useless Deku. Of course, Mjolnir was always there in the morning, as was the lightning in his veins. Thor had insisted quite eagerly that he was ready for the examination, though Midoriya still had not been able to maintain flight with Mjolnir. I got this. I got this. I got this. He repeated in his mind. The mantra, ever present since he had left his home, was vaguely calming. It was his grounding technique, his meditation, a way of life to weave peace within the intricate folds and wrinkles of his brain and appease the thunderous anxiety within his soul. That was, until he tripped over his own 2 clumsy feet. I don't got this. He braced himself for imminent death of pavement and embarrassment, but it never came. Suddenly, he halted at a 45-degree angle, something tugging around his midsection that held him in place. Huh. The tugging got stronger briefly and pulled him back onto his feet. Looking down, Midoriya saw something long and pink unwrap from his midsection and retreat behind him. Following it, he saw it was in fact a tongue, and that was recoiled into a girl with long green hair who was hunched over slightly. Even without the hunch, she was a bit shorter than him, and her hands and eyes seemed a bit larger than the average teenage girl's. The keyword here was girl. Did a girl just touch me with her tongue? On instinctual reaction, Midoriya made some sort of odd sound between popcorn popping and a chipmunk squeaking and covered his reddened face behind his arms. The girl tilted her head curiously at the reaction, poking an index finger to the corner of her mouth. Karo, sorry about using my tongue to stop you. I guess that's kind of gross since you're a stranger. Just thought it would be better than face planting. She was trying to help you. He realized, somewhat aware of how silly he probably looked. Thank you. Midoriya managed to bow slightly, returning his arms to his side. Even as he straightened out, he couldn't muster the courage to look her in the eyes. I hope Thor isn't watching. Thankfully, the girl looked up at the building past him. You must be trying out for the hero course too, Karo? Midoriya managed a small nod. Thankfully, the girl with large eyes noticed, preventing the need for him to speak further. I wonder what they'll have us do. I'm pretty nervous, Karo, she said. Despite her claim, and Midoriya's nervousness, this took him aback a bit. Her voice was anything but nervous. It was a stoic, croaky voice. If anything, it took him out of his panicked stupor a bit. If she could be nervous and not be a stuttering mess, then Midoriya probably could manage the same. Me too, he admitted, the redness falling from his cheeks a bit. Thanks again. No problem, she ribbited. Good luck today, Karo. By the way, my name is Azuitsu, but you can call me Tsu. Before he could answer, she walked away, making her way towards the exam building. Midoriya watched her for a second before looking up at the building. Well, if nothing else, I talked to a girl today. He took a deep breath and continued towards his fate. Here goes nothing. What are you waiting for? Get going. Midoriya turned back from where Present Mike was standing to see the rest of the examinees were all taking off running to hunt down the robots. Damn it, he cursed under his breath, taking off running while spinning Mjolnir at this side. The written exam, while hard, he at least figured he passed. Most of the questions he felt confident about, but there were enough throwing him off that he still felt uneasy turning it in. Not to mention how flustered he got when the tall guy with glasses told him to stop muttering. Was it necessary to call me out in front of everyone? Yeesh. The combat portion was unlike anything he had really heard of before. Robots with assigned point values? A zero-pointer that served as an obstacle? It still was a bit unclear. He turned a corner, and a 3-point robot pointed flamethrower right at Midoriya's face. He wasted no time throwing Mjolnir through the robot, causing it to splinter at all joints and collapse. 3 points, Midoriya counted to himself. Another robot, a 2-pointer, dropped from out of the side of the building and began charging towards him. Midoriya jumped to the side and called Mjolnir to return, bursting through the back of the robot. 5 points. I wish I had mastered flight, he thought, running past alleys in the mock city, keeping his eyes open for any more robots. 8 points. I'd be able to find robots much easier. Midoriya heard explosions and yelling coming from his left and instinctively ran towards it. Momentarily, he forgot this was a test. It sounded like someone was in trouble. More voices became distinct. Apparently, this was where all the robots were. Charging down the streets, he saw a blond boy surrounded by 3-pointers, destroying them as he shot a laser out of his stomach. He seems to have this under control, Midoriya thought, but no sooner than this crossed his mind, the boy doubled over in pain, clutching his midsection. My tummy, he cried. As he crouched, the last robot loomed over him, ready to strike. Midoriya wasn't sure how vicious these robots were programmed to be against entrants, but he wasn't about to find out. Look out, Deku cried, leaping over the boy and smashing the robot to pieces with a crack of Mjolnir. Nuts, bolts, and gears went flying everywhere as he brought the hammer clear through the robot and onto the streets. 11 points. Hey, are you okay? He asked, turning to the blonde and extending a hand. Laser Stomach Boy stood up on his own power, though, still holding his midsection, but smiled almost as brightly as his laser. Oui, mon ami. My hero. Merci, my green-haired friend. Thanks. Midoriya rubbed the back of his neck, blushing a bit. Good luck out there. The two took off in the same direction, but as they rounded a corner, they saw a rush of people going towards them. It looked like almost every entrant was opposite of the two of them. Midoriya even saw the taller boy with the blue hair and the glasses. As he looked up past the crowd, he saw why. The zero-pointer. The obstacle to be avoided had been unleashed, and it was huge. Towering over every mock building, it clunked the space of about a block in one step. Even Bakugo could be seen using his explosions to rocket away from it, though he diverted off to the side to find more robots to smash up. We should leave, Blonde Laser Boy gulped, turning and running without waiting for a confirmation. Midoriya would have followed in a heartbeat, but he heard something over the robots and thundering footsteps. It wasn't so much of a cry for help, but someone was hurt. Looking past the crowd, he saw a girl pinned under the rubble. She had shoulder-length brown hair and was struggling to push some large rock off of her, but her arms couldn't reach it. The zero-pointer was coming towards her, as were some smaller robots, and at this rate. Midoriya grit his teeth and began running past the crowd, despite the blood rushing to his ears and the shaking in his knees. He had to save her. As he was running, he saw Tsu hopping the other way on all fours. Their eyes met for a brief second, and even on her stoic face, she looked panicked. I have to save everyone, he panicked. Spinning Mjolnir at his side, it began to generate electricity as his heart thundered. As three pointers began to surround him, he slammed his hammer against the pavement. Bolts of lightning burst forth, exploding the robots around him as they sparked and hissed. He was at 26 points now, but didn't bother calling it out. He had bigger fish to fry. The foot of the zero-pointer came down towards the girl, but Deku threw Mjolnir towards its knee joint. In a burst of electricity, the leg broke off the monstrosity and collapsed against the streets. While well-meaning, this wasn't the best way to dispose of the robot. With one leg, the robot lost balance and began falling towards Midoriya and the brown-haired girl. For its size, some of the contestants running away might even get crushed too. Adrenaline and lighting pushing him forward, Midoriya jumped with all the Asgardian strength granted to him, as fitting his position of God of Thunder. Rocketing through the air, he met with the head of zero-pointer stories above the ground. With a heavy swing of Mjolnir, he struck the robot, causing electricity to explode above the testing grounds. Lightning crackled in all directions as the robot went flying backwards, falling apart in pieces on the ground below. A smile spread across Midoriya's face as he looked down at the carnage. He'd done it. He'd knocked a robot away from everyone else. Everyone should be safe now. Of course, this relief was momentary, as gravity kicked in and he began plummeting to the ground below. Panic replaced joy as the weight of Mjolnir dragged him headfirst towards the ground. Crap, how do I get out of this? Eyes darting frantically as the pavement began to approach him, he looked down at Mjolnir. Maybe an air blast straight down as I get close? I could HRGK? He was abruptly stopped, for the second time that day, as a long pink appendage wrapped around his midsection. Following the trail of it down, he saw it once again belonged to Tsu. She had jumped onto a nearby building wall and was sticking to it, and had shot her tongue out to catch Midoriya not long into his fall. He made no effort hiding his sigh of relief as she reeled him in towards her. Thanks, Tsu. She nodded and set him into an open window. No problem. But remember, call me Tsu, Karo. He blushed a bit as the adrenaline wore off. Right. Sorry, Tsu. I mean Tsu. A buzzer rang out around the arena, signaling that the event was over. The two looked out at the hopefuls down below them on the streets. Some were fist-pumping. Others looked like they were on the way to the morgue. Most just looked nervous, though. Karo, guess that's that. Tsuyu looked around, and her cheeks took on a brief tinge. Do you want to lift down? Sure. Deku replied, a bit embarrassed as her tongue wrapped around his chest for the third time that day. Thank you. Within a moment, she placed him on the ground and crawled down herself. By the way, Karo, I never caught your name. Ooh, it's Midoriya Izuku. He bowed slightly. It's been really nice to meet you. Her lips curled upwards in a bit of a smile. It made her eyes look bigger. How did you do, anyway? Izuku quickly tallied the points in his head. I think I had 25 points. Lost count when I went after the 0-pointer. I think that's pretty good, Karo. I was at 30 when this all happened. Most people had a few less than me. Midoriya felt his throat go somewhat drier. Why was fighting robots easier than this conversation? Was he nervous about doing worse than others or talking to Tsu? Both, he figured. Definitely both. So, out of curiosity, Midoriya gulped, mustering his courage to ask what he considered to be a serious question. Is the extending tongue your quirk? Tsu chuckled, emitting a throaty, croaking noise. Actually, my quirk is frog. It's... As she began to explain as the two walked, Midoriya's hand twitched for his notebook. Unfortunately, he hadn't brought it since it wasn't part of his exam. Still, he muttered along, naming off all sorts of uses a transformative frog quirk could be. That's so versatile. You could be plugged into any hero team and boost it, just so long as you weren't thrown in the cold. But with the right hero suit and support equipment, even that could help. But maybe the bulky suit would just weigh you down since jumping speed is so crucial for. The muttering is a bit creepy, Midoriya, Tsu interrupted, rather bluntly. She didn't sound bothered by it, at least. Sorry, Midoriya blushed. MMY quirk developed really late. SSO, I grew up thinking I was quirkless SSO. I kinda got obsessed. His rambling trailed off as Tsu laughed. It's fine, Karo. You're kind of a dork, aren't you? Huh, yeah, a bit. He admitted, rubbing the back of his head. That's okay, Karo. She smiled again. You're just passionate. Thanks, he smiled back to her. I never really thought of it that way. The two nervously joined their fellow testers in exiting the arena, President Mike announcing the results would be mailed to them in 2 to 4 weeks' time. As he was approaching his mom's car in the parking lot, Midoriya heard a shout from behind him. Hey! He turned and blinked, confused as he saw a girl with brown hair running towards him. His eyes widened when he realized that she was the girl who had been pinned under the rubble as the 0-pointer attacked. Holy crap, 2 girls talking to me. On the same day? The girl panted as she caught up to him. There you are? I never got a chance to thank you. Midoriya went red again. He'd lost count of how often that had happened to him that day. Ooh, it's no trouble. I'm glad you were okay. The brown hair girl beamed. Me too. I was ready to catch you with my quirk, but I guess the girl with the tongue got to you first. Midoriya smiled, nervousness dissipating a bit. Yeah? What's your quirk? The girl explained her zero-gravity quirk, and its drawback of feeling sick if she used it too much or on things that were too heavy. Midoriya, remembering his earlier interaction with Azui, held back his muttering, chewing on his tongue. That sounds so cool. He allowed himself to say, finally. Well, it's not Magis Electrochammer cool, but thanks. She smiled. Sorry, I totally forgot. I'm Yurariko Ochako. She held out a hand for a handshake, pinky tucked in. Midoriya Izuku, he replied, returning the handshake. Knees weak, he hoped his palms weren't sweaty, and that he'd be able to keep down Mom's spaghetti later. He snapped his attention back to the gravity user. Nice to meet you. The two parted ways, wishing each other luck on the test. Inko, of course, wasted time probing her son on who the pretty girl was. Izuku was left wondering if he'd live through the embarrassment to even get through hero school. From the throne of Asgard, Thor dispelled the scrying spell he had learned from Loki. A small smile was across his face. Midoriya had done better than he had anticipated. He rubbed his beard, considering summoning the boy to congratulate. After a few minutes, he decided against it. He'd let the boy revel in a successful night for the day, and they could get back to training tomorrow. Speaking of, Thor groaned as he stood up. I should teach him to talk to girls. That was almost painful to watch. Chapter 4. Acceptance and Reality. Midoriya sat at his desk, breathing shakily. He glanced at the All Might clock next to him, 24 hours of plus ultra justice, confirming that 20 minutes had gone by since he watched the holodisc that had been sent to him. His nose itched a little, which was probably what was calling him back to reality. All Might's words rang in his head, one phrase in particular. I never should have underestimated you, young Midoriya, the symbol of peace had said. Even through the hologram, All Might stood with his hands on his hips in a ridiculous yellow pinstripe suit, a look of pride plastered all over his face. You are definitely hero material. You ranked high in both combat points and rescue points. We didn't even tell the students about rescue points. We look forward to seeing you at UA. He slowly rolled his desk chair back, stood up, and made his way to his bedroom door on wobbly knees. He cracked the door open to see his mother standing behind it, trembling. Behind her, Thor, the god of thunder, stood there in a raggedy old hoodie. Thor tried his best to look nonchalant, but the wringing of his hands in the hoodie pocket was a pretty obvious giveaway that he was nervous as well. Midoriya looked from the two of them as they stared back. Slowly, a small smile unfurled from his lips as he let out a small laugh that could be mistaken for a gasp. I got in. Inko collapsed into her son with a hug, and Thor shouted, "Huzzah!" to the ceiling, prompting Mrs. Sakamoto in the apartment above them to stomp against her floor with a broom handle. Inko sniffled, "I'm so proud of you." She straightened herself out. "I should make you your favorite for dinner tonight." Thor, however, clapped a hand on both of their shoulders, though noticeably more gently for Inko. "Nonsense. Tonight we dine in the halls of Asgard, befitting the new god of thunder." Midoriya Inko had reservations over the last year when her son had come home one day, after being on the news, with a magical hammer. She was concerned when he had begun talking about historical figures like Thor, an Avenger from history textbooks, was suddenly training him. And while those things weighed on her mind, like any mother, the results seemed good for him at the time. He was getting out more, exercising, and he seemed happier too. Maybe becoming a hero was possible for him. And while that thought itself brought maternal fears, she wanted to see her son succeed. Thor himself had showed up every day since the exam, looking worried and asking about the results of the hero exam. After about 5 days of politely telling him that the results hadn't come in the mail yet, Inko had felt inclined to invite him in for tea. That was when Izuku finally had seen what was going on and gave embarrassed introductions for the two. Thor seemed polite, if odd at the time. Seeing Asgard, on the other hand, made her wonder if she had made an error in the type of person she was allowing to mentor her son for the better part of a year. Men and women in robes and armor were walking around everywhere, and for every weird look she gave them, she was getting the same in return for her own clothes. Although, a few Asgardian warriors seemed to recognize her son and would high-five him as they passed. Still, she was not one to pass up the hospitality of someone as seemingly generous as Thor. Asgard cuisine was quite different from Japanese fare, and she had to stifle some laughter as the king of Asgard himself took a large bite from a turkey leg barehanded. Izuku was talking to a warrior woman seated near the front. Apparently her name was Valkyrie, and she had played an important role in assisting with his training and the goings-on of Asgard. Inko took the time to lean over and ask Thor, "So what sort of training have you been giving my son?" Thor dropped the turkey leg and grinned lopsidedly. "All sorts. One of his earlier tasks was when we traveled to the underworld to fight the Draco Lich. But that's rather informal. I'm not much one for rank and custom. My second in command, Valkyrie, yes. Her there she has been helping me teach young Midoriya weapon handling and proper battle form." Valkyrie, who had overheard her name pop up, took a swig of ale from the tankard in front of her before ruffling Izuku's hair. "This bushy-head kid's become one of my favorite sparring partners. He's got a real warrior's instinct." Izuku blushed and hid behind a leg of lamb. Inko tried not to look too terrified at the amount of information she had just been given. Apparently, she had failed, as Thor reached over and grabbed her shoulder. "One can't be a hero without putting themselves in danger. But I believe that's part of what makes Midoriya worthy. He'll leap into combat, albeit recklessly. His mind is always working out the proper tactics. We'll train him to be a proper and cunning fighter." "More than can be said for you, King Thor," Valkyrie snarked, causing some of the warriors to laugh. Izuku himself stifled a laugh, hoping Thor wouldn't catch on. Thor just rolled his eyes. "I may be a hothead, but I always got things done, didn't I? I was just thinking that a lot of this seems like gladiator training, not hero training," Inko said quietly, so that just Thor heard. Thor rubbed his beard, pondering the words, before leaning in to speak to just Inko. "You know, growing up, those two things were indistinguishable. I took part in many wars on my father Odin's behalf, hailed as a hero for all the bloody battles I won. But when I came to Midgard Earth, I met a lot of brave and women who showed me that distinction. Honor, valor, wisdom, and kindness come with that title, not just feats of strength. Thor grinned to his ward's mother. Your boy has those things. I have no doubt they factor into why Mjolnir chose him. He has the inner strength to be worthy of the title. The only thing missing in him was battle prowess, which is where I have come in. Well, I can't say you haven't done a good job, Inko admitted. It's nice to see him able to stand up for himself. Are you going to be done once he goes to UA? Heavens no. Thor laughed. It had been some time since Inko had heard such a hearty sound. I'll stick around to be the boy's mentor throughout his training. Have to make sure he makes the title look good. Inko chuckled. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I think you're doing a good job. Midoriya Izuku was usually a very diligent student, usually placing 3rd or 4th grade-wise in a class, right behind Kaken. He was not immune to staring out the window as the end of the term approached, though. It wouldn't be long. Just a few more weeks, and he would be starting the hero course as the new God of Thunder, he thought, squirming a bit. He didn't like calling himself a god. Even with Thor's powers, it just wasn't him. It looks like we have 2 students in this class who will be entering the heroics course at UA. This ripped Midoriya's attention right back to the front of the class. Bakugo Katsuki, a few of the blonde's friends hooped and made other obnoxious noises, and Midoriya Izuku. The class was silent for that, save for a few murmurs. While the teasing that came with being quirkless had stopped, people were avoiding Midoriya for different reasons. It was always different. Some were distrustful, claiming that the boy had hidden his quirk for some reason. Others thought for sure the hammer was just some cool support gear that faked the abilities for him. And others just avoided him because they knew talking to him would attract the ire of Bakugo. The teacher himself seemed a bit surprised. Well, a good job, guys. Class resumed as normal, but Midoriya still was just itching to get home that day. He was the first one out of the door when the bell rang. But no sooner was he outside of the door when Bakugo came up and grabbed his shoulder. We need to talk, nerd. Despite tensing up at the words, Midoriya turned to look at Bakugo. The command was at a lower decibel than he was accustomed to. Sure, Kaken. What's up? Bakugo led Midoriya over to the fence towards the exit of the school. He glanced down to the hammer in Midoriya's hands he'd taken to bringing it to school with him. Quit. What? Izuku replied, eyes widening. Bakugo frowned, fists clenched at his sides. I'm telling you, quit the hero course. Drop out. Midoriya clenched his fists and grit his teeth. His eyes began to water with a mix of frustration and determination. No. Bakugo pushed him against the fence aggressively. You can't. That was as far as he got before Midoriya pushed him off. I will. He fought back a sniffle. I have to be crying at a time like this. I've always wanted to be a hero, Kaken. His fists clenched at his side. You know that. You've known since we were kids, watching All Might on TV. Bakugo opened his mouth to argue back, but Midoriya didn't let him get a word in. You aren't stopping me. I don't care how many explosions or nasty word you throw at me. This is what I'm meant to do. I know it. I can feel it. Midoriya picked up Mjolnir. It's why I was able to save you. Bakugo looked down at the hammer, suspiciously, and back at Deku. What's that supposed to mean? The smaller boy shrugged. I don't know. He rubbed his eyes. You're an asshole, Kaken. Bakugo's eyes widened, not expecting the response. Deku continued while he had the boy off guard. But I still think of you as my friend. And I wouldn't have let you die. Because I'm going to be a hero. Wiping his eyes on his sleeves one last time, Midoriya pushed past Bakugo and walked quickly towards his house. For once, Bakugo couldn't seem to find the words as he stewed in his anger. He clenched his fists at feelings he'd never had before. How did I let this happen? He murmured to his own white knuckles. Just you wait, Deku. I'll show you who the strongest is. I'll never quit, Midoriya muttered to himself as he stormed off. I'm not your doormat anymore. That feeling itself carried him through the next few weeks until it was finally time to start UA. Even with the fire in his belly, he felt the same nervousness he'd had before the entrance exam as he approached the building itself. Mjolnir in his right hand, he walked briskly towards the front doors. Disguised in a hoodie and sunglasses, though his shaggy beard and shaggier blonde hair still drew some looks, Thor watched from a bus stop. He had no reason to be there, but he couldn't help himself. Having not had kids of his own, that he knew of, there was no stopping him from seeing off his protege on his first day. "It's good to see you again, Thor." Thor turned his head slightly to see All Might looking at him from behind a tree. Disguised in his emaciated form, no one would bother him. "Tashinori," Thor greeted curtly. "I knew it couldn't be a coincidence that a certain young man would show up with that hammer if you weren't involved." The symbol of peace had a much more amicable tone, even giving the king of Asgard a small grin. "You chose wisely." "I always do," Thor snorted disdainfully. "You would know. I believe you have a class to teach, All Might." "I do," All Might agreed, turning towards the school. "Feel free to visit any time. A speech from you would make a great lesson." "Maybe," Thor shrugged. "I'll have to check my schedule. Quite busy, as you know." Izuku took a deep breath as he stood outside of Class 1A. He hadn't talked to Bakugo since they had argued outside of school weeks ago. Maybe he won't be in this class, and I won't have to worry about it." He slid open the door, and his face fell, almost immediately. Not only was Bakugo there, but Angry Glass's blue hair was also there, and they gave looks of disapproval. But before he could let a sinking feeling hit him, he heard a voice call to him, "Bonjour, mon ami." He turned and looked over, jumping back slightly as a blonde boy jumped directly in front of him, shaking his hand energetically. "So glad to see you here." It took a second for Midoriya to register that he knew this boy already. Once it hit, he beamed and returned the handshake briefly. "Oh hey, from the entrance exam." I realized we were never introduced." The boy stepped back and placed a hand over his chest. Midoriya couldn't help but think the man was rather exuberant in his mannerisms. "Aoyama Yuga." Midoriya Izuku. As he stated his name, he saw a girl with long green hair seated a few desks away turn around. Their eyes met, and he realized it was another familiar face. He waved. "Hey, Azui." She smiled and waved back. "Hey, Midoriya. I told you to call me Tsu." He rubbed the back of his neck, cheeks tinged a bit. "Sorry. Glad to see the two of you here, WHOA." He'd barely finished the thought before a mop of brown hair was hovering a few inches from his nose. Uraraka had seen him and had charged up. "Hey, Midoriya. Looks like we're in the same class." "Looks like you're really close." Midoriya gulped and instinctively looked away and scratched at his cheek to put a little distance between himself and the brunette. "Yeah." Uraraka took no notice of his discomfort and went on, "I'm so excited. I can't wait to find out who our homeroom teacher is or what he's like." They wouldn't have to find out long. The door slid open and a man walked in. Well, no, this is inaccurate. A man cocooned in a yellow sleeping bag hobbled in, hopping like some sort of upright caterpillar. The sight was so bizarre that everyone in the class froze and watched as this happened, leaving what they suspected to be their teacher staring back at them. "Well," he grunted, "get to your seats." This man, as Midoriya and his classmates learned the man was Aizawa Shoto, Eraserhead, a hero who typically rejected the spotlight. A stealth-based hero, his quirk allowed him to erase someone's quirk temporarily by looking at them. Instead of going to the welcoming assembly, he took them all outside, finally stepping out of his own sleeping bag and into his hero costume. This wouldn't be a problem in and of itself, except that Aizawa revealed his reputation. He expelled students who he felt had no potential, including a whole class last year. This year, in his utmost generosity, he would be holding a quirk fitness test instead. And whoever scores lowest will be expelled. Midoriya glanced around at the other of the students. Why were none of them nervous? Using their quirks in fitness challenges was something he thought might happen, but not with stakes like this. Furthermore, while he had gotten in great shape between the physique Mjolnir granted and a year's worth of intense training, the quirk itself didn't help with a ton of these challenges. Until he got to the 10-meter sprint. Before him, Ida and Bakugo faced off. Bakugo used explosions to propel himself forward, falling just short of Ida's engine quirk. All the same, it gave Midoriya an idea. Next up, he was facing off against a rather short student made Mineta. The smaller boy looked at Mjolnir and scoffed. "PSDH," he said with an annoying lisp, "the only hammer I need to get girls is the one in my paw." Thankfully, he was cut off by Aizawa's whistle. As Mineta took off running, Midoriya turned around. "Maybe I can't use Mjolnir to fly, but..." He jumped into the air and spun Mjolnir in front of him, creating a large, concentrated air blast. This propelled him backwards well past the 10 meters, and he landed on his butt, looking up at Aizawa, who looked unimpressed as always. You tied Ida for top time. Midoriya beamed down at his hammer. Okay, that's a good sign. He sighed with relief as he headed back to the rest of his classmates. Good one, Karo, Azui said as she hopped past him to the starting line. Thanks. Midoriya blushed. He was so flustered by the attention, he didn't notice the death glare Bakugo was giving him with shaking fists. The last challenge was using your quirk to throw a ball. Not too complex, but Midoriya wondered if he could do something similar with the ball like he'd done with running. Maybe I can throw it straight up and then use an air current? No, probably wouldn't get enough of a lasting push. He watched the others go before him. Bakugo using his explosions to reach over 800 meters was impressive, but Uraraka made the ball slowly drift out of orbit to win the challenge completely. As Midoriya stepped up to the plate, Aizawa stopped him. Leave the hammer. This gave the boy pause. Sir, can I ask why? I just want to see you do one with the hammer and without the hammer. Is it part of your quirk, or is it support gear? Aizawa asked. Summoning the hammer is part of the quirk and it channels my other abilities. Midoriya explained. So, kind of both? Strange. The teacher grunted. That's a new one. Fine. One with, one without. Midoriya set Mjolnir down, walked 3 feet away, and held out his hand, summoning the hammer for demonstration. The hammer is part of my quirk, sir. Nothing can stop it when I summon it. Well, that puts it in a weird category, Aizawa said. How illogical. Midoriya gulped as he felt he was getting on the teacher's nerves, set Mjolnir down, and walked up to the plate. He knew he had 3 tries, but he didn't want to waste them. Closing his eyes, he clutched the ball and tried to draw out his inner storm. He threw the ball with this and all his strength combined, but the boost barely got him 100 meters, on the low end for the class. Wordlessly, Aizawa handed Midoriya another ball. All right, try with the hammer, Aizawa grunted. Planning his strategy, Midoriya threw the ball straight up into the air, summoned Mjolnir, and smashed the ball like a bat, knocking it into the distance. Aizawa clicked his tongue and looked down at his device. 917 meters, he read off neutrally. He looked Midoriya up and down slightly. Well, good enough. Next. Midoriya breathed a sigh of relief as returned to his classmates blushing as he got a big thumbs up from Azui. After a few more rounds, Aizawa tallied up the scores, revealing the rankings. Izuku's jaw nearly dropped. He was ranked second in the class, right behind Todoroki Shudo, the son of Endeavor. And right under him was Kaken. From the other side of the huddle of classmates, Bakugo clenched his fists, humiliated in spite of the high ranking he received. He would remember this. Chapter 5, Suited for the Task. Midoriya was practically vibrating in his seat as he waited for his afternoon classes. Today was the day, a day he could have only dreamed about since he was a kid. Today was the day he would be taught by All Might. He wasn't the only one excited either. Azui and Uraraka were talking with a group of girls as they waited for the symbol of peace to arrive, while Kirishima, Kaminari, Shiro, and Minato were arguing about what the coolest feat All Might had ever done was. Obviously the fight with Toxic Chainsaw. Only Ida, Todoroki, and Bakugo were remaining silent, facing forward and staring at the door as they waited. Though, Midoriya noticed that while Ida remained stoic, Todoroki looked almost apprehensive, and he couldn't help but wonder why. All thoughts of that flew out the window as the door opened, and All Might himself strutted in, donned in a Silver Age uniform. Greetings, students of Class 1A. A cheer rose up from the class, and Izuku couldn't help but laugh and join in. All Might crowed about the hero training that would begin today at Ground Beta. There would be a 2-on-2 hero versus villain contest. Now, for one of the coolest parts of hero school, the hero crowed, hitting a button on the desk. Rows of hero costumes emerged from compartments on the wall. Suit up. Midoriya looked at the compartment that had his hero costume and gulped, remembering a conversation he'd had with Thor just after finding out he'd be admitted to UA. A few weeks prior. So what did you need to see me about today, Thor? Midoriya asked, walking through the halls of Asgard with his mentor. More training? His tone went more serious. Did something happen to your controller again? I can get it back. No, Midoriya, Thor laughed. Nothing like that. Come, you'll see soon enough. Midoriya looked at the art in the halls. Murals of Thor in battle with the other warriors of Asgard, portraits of his father, Odin, and their family. Thor never much talked about his family, and while Izuku was naturally curious about where the god of thunder obtained his abilities, it didn't seem right to ask. Finally, Thor threw open the doors into a room filled with racks of swords, axes, flails, spears, and warhammers. The armory. Thor boomed, one of the greatest of Asgard's accomplishments. Whoa! Midoriya's eyes widened as he looked from one weapon to another, each more powerful than the last. Don't think I can take these to school. I already had to fill out forms for Mjolnir. Uffed, Thor scoffed. You have Mjolnir, you don't need anything else. You do, however, need to look the part of God of Thunder. Come, we'll suit you up in the back. Oh, like my hero costume. Midoriya grinned. My mom had made. We don't view it so much as a costume. Thor chuckled, not letting his word finish. Furthermore, you need protection. I am a full-blooded Asgardian, which means I am durable. I could go out and adventure in a t-shirt and be none the worse for wear. You could shoot me in the head, and it'd be like a mosquito bite. Whoa, Midoriya gaped. That hat's amazing. It's handy, Thor agreed, but you are not a full-blooded Asgardian, yet. What do you mean? Midoriya asked. Wielding Mjolnir does not automatically turn a Midgardian into an Asgardian. As you saw, the hammer gives you a boost to your physical abilities, puts you in peak physical condition. But to change you into an Asgardian, Thor thought for a minute. How did Banner put it? It rewrites who you are. Your genes. It takes a long time. Wait, so one day I'll be bulletproof. Midoriya beamed. That's awesome. Indeed, Thor boomed. But not yet. And that's why we're getting you some armor. He led Deku back further, into a room with full of armor racks, stacked with leather chest guards and various steel protectors. We are warriors, Thor continued, even if in the last few centuries we have used our prowess as keepers of peace. This will be your armor, as a proud Asgardian representative to protect Midgard. Midoriya was humbled by the words. Thank you, Thor. That's really OW. The humbling and his sentence were stopped as Thor placed a helmet on top of his head. Air. This was my helmet when I first joined the Avengers. Thor beamed. We'll get you some chainmail, and I'll see if I can find any leg gear your size. As the king of Asgard walked off and dug through heaps of armor, Midoriya took a step back and looked at the metal, winged helmet on his head. It looked straight from the pictures in the history textbooks that Thor used to wear. Won't that weigh me down? Even with Mjolnir's blessing, I'm not as durable as you are as an Asgardian, like you said. Thor emerged from the pile and made a puffed sound. Throw a chainmail shirt on Midoriya's shoulders. To the boy's surprise, it felt no different than wearing a normal shirt. My boy, we craft our weapons and armor from URU, one of the most durable and amazing metals in existence. Mjolnir itself is the most refined URU weapon in all of creation, and our armor is enchanted to be as lightweight as it is protective. This shirt alone will catch any blade and protect you from heavy force. Say, Thor winked, which looked particularly funny considering he only had one eye from one of Kacho's explosions. Midoriya smiled politely. He'd given up on correcting Thor when it came to Bakugu's name. That's pretty cool. Before long, Thor had, perhaps in homage to himself, dressed Midoriya in armor similar to his own back during his days as an Avenger. But when he went to grab a cape, Midoriya vehemently refused. Capes have been considered poor choices for hero suits for decades. They just tend to lead to accidents. Fair enough, Thor conceded, stepping back, smiling. Look at you. You're the spitting image of myself when I was starting out. You'll need some combat boots, though. I want to keep mine, Midoriya immediately insisted. They're a gift from my dad before. A pause followed, filling the air between the two in an awkward silence. Thor, for as boisterous and headstrong as he was, recognized the tension in the room easily. It wasn't hard for someone who had lost a parent to see the same pain in someone else. Say no more, young Midoriya. Is the armor to your liking? Midoriya cringed, being the last one out of the locker room, and walked over to ground beta. He took a shaky breath as he put Thor's helmet on his head. He hoped this didn't look too dated. Immediately, Azui noticed him and hopped over. Hey, Midoriya. Karo, she greeted, straightening herself out. She tapped a finger to her mouth. I like your suit. It's pretty retro, Karo. Midoriya's face grew hot as he struggled to find a response. Thanks. Yours too. She tilted her head a little. Are you okay? He nodded meekly. He was fine and all, but it was hard to focus when Azui's hero costume was, well, very form-fitting. Midoriya shifted slightly in an effort to redirect his blood flow away from his nether regions. Thankfully, a distraction came in the form of his teacher. Now then, All Might boomed. We will split off into pairs. The villains will go in and locate the nuclear device. After 15 minutes, I'll send in the hero pair. The hero's job is to take the device from the villains without destroying it. That would set off the explosion. Alternatively, you can capture the villains in capture tape, which I will provide. First villain pair will be Bakugo and Mineta. Oh shit, Midoriya thought grimly. And the hero team to oppose them will be All Might scanned around. Shiro Hanta and, you there? Midoriya Izuku. Before Midoriya could scan along the room for his partner, a rather plain-looking boy with some big elbows approached him. Hey man, glad to be working with you. I'm Shiro. Midoriya shook his hand. You too. So let's talk strategy. What's your quirk? Heh, all business with you, huh? Shiro snickered, holding up his arm. I shoot an extra strength tape from my elbows here. It's useful for swinging around and capturing people. He rubbed the back of his neck, confidence waning a bit. Although, if I use it too much, the adhesive gets kinda weaker. Midoriya gave him a big grin. That's an awesome quirk. Mobility and capture potential? That leaves for so many pragmatic uses. Thanks, man, but that's got nothing on your quirk there. He pointed at Mjolnir. Wind and lighting, and it comes with the sweet weapon? You could wangdoodle someone real good. Bonk him into next week. Midoriya laughed, having never heard anyone his age describe his abilities in such a lax way. Yeah, not everyone's a fan though. His eyes darted over to Bakugo briefly, but long enough for Shiro to notice. Blondie? The black-haired boy asked. Yeah, he's always shooting you nasty looks. What's up with that? We went to school together. I guess you could say he's not a fan of me ever since I found. Midoriya paused, thinking of a way to finish that sentence. My quirk. A battle between rivals. Shiro pumped his elbows back in an excited stance. Oh man, I'm fired up to be part of this. Are you the Sasuke or the Naruto? Wha? Never mind. You're too friendly and quiet to be either of them, Shiro laughed. Thanks. Midoriya replied. Anyway, let's stick together. If I can stun them long enough with Mjolnir or lightning, you can probably capture them pretty quickly. Whap em and wrap em. Shiro cried, love it. Yeah. 15 minutes or so later, Shiro and Midoriya were scouring the halls of the ground beta building, working from the ground level up in search of Mineta and Bakugo. As they searched, the two foe villains paced around the realistic missile they were tasked to guard. Bakugo seemed especially twitchy. You okay, man? Mineta asked, eyebrow raised. Or are you just in character? It's that shitty Deku. Bakugo barked. I know that stupid bullshit with the hammer isn't a quirk. PFSHFBT, Mineta scoffed. It's dorky, but come on. You saw him take down that giant robot. Saved Uraraka's luscious body, lucky bastard. I knew that weak little shrimp for 15 years, you idiot, the taller boy scowled. Totally quirkless. Then he just shows up with some stupid hardware store garbage and thinks he owns the place. Thinks he's better than me. Bakugo punched a wall. He's always thought he was better than me. Mineta backed off a bit. Hey man, you'll give away our location. I don't give a shit. Bakugo growled, storming off. I'm going to end this now. Once the explosively foul-mouthed teen had left the room, Mineta shook his head. Dude needs some therapy, so he can be as smooth and well-adjusted as me. Midoriya and Shiro had made their way up another few floors, the clock ticking down on them as they ascended. Where could they be hiding? Shiro sighed, losing some of his earlier enthusiasm. Bakugo doesn't exactly strike me as the type to sit around and wait. Midoriya nodded, apprehension growing because he was thinking the same thing. They had heard some commotion above and went up a few floors to find their opponents, but things had gone eerily quiet since then. Until he turned a corner and saw a spark. Get back, he shouted, leaping backwards as Shiro did the same. An explosion rocked the corridor, denting the wall. You got lucky, you shitty Deku. Midoriya spun Mjolnir by his side, Zero backing up to give the rivals some room. He knew how Bakugo fought. The two had grown up together after all. Bakugo was lunging, upper body forward for a frontal assault. How he starts every fight, Midoriya confirmed to himself. Bakugo's eyes drifted down to Mjolnir, and Midoriya struck. He stepped forward and threw a left-hand jab directly into Bakugo's nose during the momentary distraction. A few days prior. Your punches are sloppy and slow, Valkyrie grunted, holding up her own fists to spar. And you kick like an infant in the womb. I don't think you're going to be fighting snails, young Midoriya. Midoriya motioned for a timeout, panting. It's hard to throw punches and kicks while holding Mjolnir. Shouldn't I be trying to hit you with it, and not everything else? Thor, who was watching from the sidelines of the Asgardian training hall, shook his head. You hit things with the hammer fine. But that teacher of yours you told me about, Eraser Face, makes a point. You need to be able to fight without. And still, Mjolnir has a purpose you haven't used much. What's that? Midoriya asked, turning to his mentor. Which, at that moment, Valkyrie tackled him to the ground. Diversion. Present day. Bakugo staggered backwards, clutching his nose in shock and pain from the sneak jab. Why you? That was as far as he got before Midoriya sent a bolt of lightning into his chest, zapping Bakugo and forcing him back against the wall. In an instant, Zero ran forward to apprehend Bakugo with his tape. But the explosive blonde recovered quicker than either of his opponents expected, thrusting his hand forward and igniting a blast that threw the tape-themed hero back. Quickly, Zero shot a line at the ceiling and swung backwards out of range. Bakugo lunged forward with more explosions, but Midoriya spun Mjolnir to blow the smoke and fire back towards Bakugo, creating a smokescreen. Let's regroup, he grunted to Zero, and the two took off down and around the corner. Sorry man, I wasn't quick enough, Zero panted as soon as they were out of earshot. No, I think I might have held back too much, Midoriya admitted. I've never thrown a lot of electricity at humans, so I'm still figuring out how much is enough. He glanced behind them. Look, I know we had a plan, but I think Kakin is out to get me. Go on ahead, I'll keep him busy. No problem, just leave it to me. Zero beamed, taking off the opposite way, using his tape to swing around the corner. Okay, Midoriya sighed, slowing his breathing down to listen to his surroundings. When he didn't hear anyone charging after him, he figured Bakugo must have looped around to catch him by surprise. Suddenly, he heard running from the corridor over to the side of him. Midoriya spun Mjolnir and made his way down the hallway, but the footsteps were gone. He heard running from where he had just been, sending a chill up his spine. What is he doing? He wondered to himself as he doubled back. As he turned the corner, he saw him. Bakugo looked disheveled, but Midoriya stood firm, waiting for his approach. But Bakugo didn't approach. Instead, he grinned madly. What? You thought these stupid-looking things on my arms were for show? Deku wasn't given a chance to think about this before Bakugo pointed his arm in his direction and unleashed an explosion bigger than Deku had ever seen before. The entire corridor was engulfed in the blast, and Midoriya didn't even have time to try and divert the blast with Mjolnir before he was swallowed up as well. The force from the explosion pushed him into the wall, which caved and broke, leaving him lying backwards on a fire escape. That Theyukt, he groaned, before rolling himself to his stomach and getting up on all fours. He could hear the entire building beginning to groan from the strain placed on it. Before either could continue, a voice rang out from the speakers within the building. Bakugo, that force could have realistically set off the bomb. One more blast like that, your team will be disqualified. Bakugo sneered. I don't have enough sweat built up for that anyway. Sweat? Midoriya asked. Then he looked down at the gauntlets Bakugo was wearing. Oh, I see. You store sweat in there for bigger blasts, don't you? Knowing won't help you, you shit. Bakugo propelled himself forward with this explosions, but Midoriya was ready now. He threw Mjolnir at Bakugo, who ducked. Midoriya summoned the hammer back, forcing Bakugo to duck again. But this was what Midoriya wanted. He charged forward to meet the hammer, grabbed it, and swung it upwards into Bakugo's stomach as he stood up. The blonde was sent flying backwards, landing on his rear with the wind knocked out of him. Midoriya shot a blast of lightning at Bakugo, but now it was the taller boy's turn to be ready. Using an explosion, Bakugo propelled himself off the ground and back away from the electric attack. Deku didn't let up. He threw bolt after bolt, pushing Bakugo back and giving him no openings to retake the offensive. "Hey, Midoriya, do you copy?" Zero asked through the headset. We ran into a problem." Over the explosions and crackling of lightning, Midoriya didn't hear his teammate, unfortunately. One floor above, Mineta, who was wrapped in tape around a pillar, looked to Zero, whose feet and legs were stuck to the floor with some of his sticky balls. "Any luck?" Mineta asked with a sigh. "Nope," Zero groaned. "Looks like we're stuck until the match is finished or one of our teammates finishes the whole thing." "Great. Just great," Mineta pouted. The two teens looked around the room for a moment before Zero laid back against the floor in defeat. "So, how's it going?" One floor down, Midoriya had driven Bakugo back into an open room. "Can you hear me?" Ducking back a bit, he checked his earpiece. "Zero, is that you?" "There you are," Zero's voice answered, sounding relieved. "The bomb is right above you in the open room. Did you deal with Bakugo?" Something bounced off the floor towards Midoriya, and his eyes widened. In addition to storing sweat for bigger blasts, his suit also was good for grenades. But Midoriya was a quick thinker. As the grenade bounced towards him, he swung Mjolnir low and bat the explosive back towards Bakugo. Bakugo had no time to react, and his own explosion rocked him backwards into the wall. Seizing the opportunity, Midoriya sent a bigger lightning blast directly into Bakugo's chest. Once he had stopped convulsing, the blonde collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. 30-second warning. All Might's voice rang out. "Damn," Midoriya grunted before getting an idea. All the open areas were in the same space on each floor. That meant the bomb had to be right above him. "Zero, that bomb isn't in the middle of the room, is it?" "What? No," Zero replied. Running over to Bakugo, Midoriya grabbed one of the grenades off his belt. Smacking towards the ceiling with Mjolnir, it exploded, opening a hole to the next floor. Jumping into the air, Midoriya fired an air blast at the ground, launching himself up through the hole. He breathed a sigh of relief that he hadn't disturbed the bomb, or Zero or Mineta, still caught in each other's traps for that matter. Landing, he quickly ran over to the bomb and tagged it. The hero team wins. All Might's voice yelled out over the speaker. "Oh, wow, yeah. Zero shouted happily. "Suck it, Mineta. You're trapped just like me," Mineta yelled back. Midoriya himself just collapsed on the ground and stared down at Mjolnir. A small smile crept over his lips. He'd done it. He'd overcome Bakugo for the first time in his life. He placed a hand over the chainmail on his stomach. "Hey, Midoriya," Zero called. "Not to ruin the moment, but please get these gross balls off me." "They aren't gross," Mineta screamed. Chapter 6. The Past Looking to the Future. "So you zapped him and stole a grenade?" Thor laughed as he met Midoriya outside of his apartment. "That'll show Kacho to underestimate you. Good work, Midoriya." Midoriya rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed at the praise. "It was rough. He really stepped up his game to get me. But, is that why you're here? Usually you don't just show up. You summon me out of nowhere instead with a random lightning bolt." Truth be told, Deku didn't mind this approach. Thor shook his head. "Well, no. Though I'm always glad to hear your class exploits have gone well. I was actually summoned by a Midgard acquaintance for some business. Thought I'd see how your battle gear held up. If it weren't for that enchanted chainmail, I'd probably have been knocked out when I got blown through the wall," the teen admitted. "So it definitely was helpful, and it didn't slow me down at all." "Oh, Thor," said a feminine voice from a few feet away. The two turned to see Midoriya's mother Inko was standing at the landing of the apartment complex to get the mail. "Good to see you. Would you like to join us for dinner?" Thor smiled but shook his head. "I'm afraid I'm just stopping by. Perhaps another time, though. Your cooking has captured my tongue, as I'm sure your beauty catches many an eye." Deku looked at Thor uncomfortably. "Are you flirting with my mom?" Inko just laughed. "You flatter her. The door's always open." As she left, Deku met his mentor's gaze. "You can't just flirt with my mom in front of me." "Got it. Come by and flirt with her when you aren't around." Thor smirked. I'm afraid I must be going now. Take care, Midoriya. I will see you soon. Deku just shook his head as Thor walked off. Gross. About half an hour later, with the halls of UA mostly emptied, Thor made his way to the staff office and knocked. Come in, a pleasant voice answered. Thor entered, as requested, and saw All Might there with Principal Nizu. Tashinori, he greeted coldly, and then turned to the principal, whom he had never met before. Panda, he added with a small bow of politeness. Actually, I'm a mouse, Nizu corrected, but you can call me Principal Nizu. I oversee this fine establishment. Principal Nizu of the Pandas, Thor corrected himself with another small bow. Anyway, Nizu continued, deciding to ignore the urge to correct Thor further. All Might here has requested my assistance in explaining the situation to you. I've come to understand that one of our students doesn't possess a quirk. Instead, he's inherited your unique abilities as God of Thunder. Apparently, All Might doesn't possess the ability not to spill secrets, Thor snarked. Principal Nizu has my utmost confidence and has been keeping a secret on my behalf, All Might explained. Furthermore, with the abilities and costume similarities, there have been rumors going around already, Nizu added. While neither of you have made the knowledge of it public, it's only a matter of time before the two of you are linked by anyone with a passing knowledge of the history of heroics. I saw it halfway through day one, and I'm sure rumors are going around already. Fair enough, Thor conceded. Midoriya has not wanted to announce it yet, however, and I respect his wishes in doing so. Is that why I was summoned? Well, no, All Might sighed. Look, Thor, I know how you feel about me, but since you've chosen a successor, I was hoping to get your thoughts on choosing one of my own. As Deku walked into school the next day, he was surprised that Aizawa was there on time. He checked the time on his phone just to be sure and saw he had a few minutes before the bell rang. Sitting down at his desk, he set Mjolnir down as he always did. He was tapped on the shoulder and turned to see Ida standing here. Midoriya tried not to gulp, despite the fact that neither of them had but had since the remark he made at the entrance exam. Midoriya still found him to be a bit intimidating. What's up, Ida? To his surprise, Ida bowed abruptly. I would like to apologize for the attitude I had given you previously and some admitted feelings of disdain. Midoriya blinked. You see, Ida said, straightening himself up. After the exam, I thought maybe you had some insider information about taking out the zero-pointer that gave you an edge in the standings. But I see now that I was wrong. You were simply doing the right thing by saving another examinee, even if it was against your best interests. Oh, Deku said, unsure of what else to add. It seems you had the heroic spirit the school was looking for, Ida sighed. I feel I could learn a lot from you, and would like it if we could start over. He held out his hand stiffly for a businessman-like handshake. Midoriya grinned and shook the taller boy's hand. Sure thing, Ida. Don't even worry about it. I just got lucky. That conversation began what turned out to be a very eventful day in Midoriya Izuku's life. Midoriya got elected class president. It turns out Ida, Uraraka, and Azui all voted for him. There was a lockdown due to suspected break-in. Ida managed to calm the student body down, and Midoriya decided to give the position of class president to Ida. As he walked home with Azui, Uraraka, and Ida, he hoped this would be the most eventful day of the term. It was a lot of excitement. Of course, it wouldn't be. A few days later, the class was abuzz at their newest bout of hero training. So we'll be going to the USJ, an off-site facility, for rescue training. Aizawa sighed. Gear up in your hero suits, and we'll hop on the bus. You have 15 minutes. There was a clattering of seats scraping as the students began talking amongst themselves. Uraraka, Azui, and Ida all gathered around Midoriya as they walked to the changing rooms outside the class. I've been waiting for rescue training. Uraraka squealed. Who do you think will be teaching it? Whoever it is, we must be sure to absorb as much knowledge as we can from their years of experience and expertise, Ida said, grabbing his suit. Don't act like you aren't excited, Karo. Azui snarked flatly. What do you think, Midoriya? The green-haired boy shrugged, but couldn't contain his grin. He even held up his notebook. Whoever it is, I can't wait to see their quirk in person. Just try not to mutter, Azui teased, causing him to blush. Minutes later, as they all sat on the bus, Deku sat next to Azui and set Mjolnir down on the bus floor. Hey, Midoriya, can I ask you something about your quirk, Karo? Azui asked. Oh, sure. What's up, Sue? Azui tapped a finger to her mouth and looked from him to Mjolnir. You know, it makes me think of all the old Avengers stuff they teach in History of Heroics. Isn't it a lot like that Viking guy? Midoriya shifted uncomfortably. Ooh yeah, I thought that too when it first manifested. Just like Thor. He was hoping that would be enough to throw her off, but their conversation caught the attention of Kirishima, who was sitting on the other side of him. Oh yeah, didn't that guy use a hammer too? The redhead asked. Thankfully, he changed the topic rather quickly. I wish I had a cool, flashy quirk like yours instead of this lame hardening. He stiffened his fist for show. It'll be hard to get noticed in the hero business like this. I think your quirk is awesome, Midoriya said, voice clear with sincerity. It's really powerful. I don't think you'd have any problem. You mean it? Kirishima beamed. Thanks, dude. Yeah, but it's not as powerful as Midoriya's old-school Avenger powers, Todoroki's quirk, or Bakugu's explosions. Kaminari piped in from the other side of Azui. He chuckled a bit. But I don't know how Bakugu would ever be popular with that nasty attitude. Bakugu, who had heard this from the back of the bus, scowled. Shut up. Your quirk is just a shitty, watered-down version of Deku's. As bickering continued, Midoriya breathed a sigh of relief. He knew eventually the link between himself and Thor would be made clear. He just wasn't sure how he wanted to go about it. The students arrived in short matter of time, and were excited Uraraka especially to find out they would be learning from one of the top rescue heroes out there, 13. As she began lecturing, Midoriya pulled out his notebook and began taking meticulous notes, trying to ignore Uraraka practically bouncing next to him in excitement. He was so good at ignoring the outside stimulus he at first didn't realize his classmates were shouting until Azui started tapping him on the shoulder. HM. He looked up from his notebook to see a swirling purple and black portal opening far down below in the open area of the USJ. Is this part of the exercise? He asked nervously. A few members of the group of people began laughing maniacally. I'm going to guess no. Azui ribbited. Midoriya stepped forward to get a better look only to be stopped as Aizawa threw an arm out in front of the boy. Something's wrong. Aizawa grunted. A hush fell over Class 1A as Aizawa and 13 exchanged glances. After a silent exchange, Aizawa nodded. You protect the class. I'll handle this. But sir, Ida objected, aren't you a stealth hero? Going up against a large crowd like this would put you at a tactical disadvantage. As class president, you watch and learn, Aizawa commanded, pulling a pair of goggles down over his eyes and dashing down the hill in front of him. The class watched in awe as Aizawa took down villain after villain. Despite their numbers, there was no coordination in their assault. Still, Aizawa couldn't get every single one. Thugs and villains began scaling the hills after the class, and 13 turned to the crowd. Out. We need to leave. Oh, I think not. A deep voice boomed out, forming a dark swirl over the group. It was the same kind that had brought all the villains in the first place, and it had happened so quickly, most of the class couldn't help but jump. It all happened before Midoriya could grab Mjolnir at his side. A portal opened up under the two of them, and the world was plunged into darkness. The light returned, and all Midoriya could tell was that he was falling. Splash. Falling into the water, apparently. Struggling to keep his eyes open, he righted himself and prepared to summon Mjolnir, but he saw some guy with a shark head zooming towards him. And with the way he was snapping his jaws, Deku was pretty sure this wasn't a rescuer. Millions of panicked half-strategies began to fly through his head as he desperately tried to prepare some lightning in his body, a terrible idea in the water, admittedly, but he was saved from the situation as Azui came rocketing through the water and drop-kicked the villain in the side of the head. Hey Midoriya, she blubbed through the lake water. Deku gave a small wave. She stuck her tongue out, wrapped it around his waist, and swam up towards the surface. In midair, she deposited Deku on the side of a ferry and began scaling the side of the boat herself. As Midoriya caught his breath laying on the side of the boat, he breathed a sigh of relief. Man, Siyu is really good at coming to my rescue, huh? He stood up to see the girl in question hop over the railing. Was anyone else under there? Midoriya asked. Siyu shook her head. No, Karo. I even did a quick lap before spotting you. It's just us. You had time to do a lap under there? He asked, bewildered. She nodded. I might not be that fast on ground, but you should see me in the water. Perks of the frog quirk, Karo. The two looked down to see the shark-headed villain and other similarly themed aquatic thugs poking their heads out of the water, staring up at the students on the boat. What are they doing, Karo? Tsuyu asked. Midoriya stared down and looked from villain to villain. He could hear shouts and the sound of fighting in the distance, but all the villains in this lake were just staring up at Deku and Tsuyu in anticipation. Wait, Midoriya muttered, something in his mind clicking. They're waiting to see what they do. Which means what? Tsuyu asked. They don't know what we can do. His eyes lit up almost excitedly, which gives us the element of surprise. What do you mean? Midoriya lifted his hand, grinning. In a moment, Mjolnir had snapped into his open palm. These guys must not know all of our quirks. If they did, why would they put someone whose main powers are electricity and aquatic-based in an aquatic area? Karo, all right, Azui said, placing her finger to her chin. They could have put me in the tundra area or fire zone. I'd be next to useless there. She looked over the side of the railing. We're still surrounded and outnumbered, though. Yeah, we probably shouldn't stick around for a fight like this, Deku admitted, rubbing his chin. Still, there's got to be a way we can get to the shore. Think you could jump there? Maybe, but even if I jump carrying you, they'll have no trouble catching up, Karo. All right. Arg, I know I can think of something. Deku groaned, squatting down and entering mutter mode. Kinda creepy, Karo, but if it helps you think, go for it. The sound of explosions rang out from the quarry area as Bakugo wasted no time exploding any random thug who dared approach him. And as some tried to run away, they got stuck on Mineta's sticky balls. At which point, Bakugo would explode them anyway. Or, if he was closer, their classmate Kirishima would knock them out with his hardening quirk. I don't need any help from you extras. Bakugo screamed over his own angst explosions. Excuse me, I've trapped about half of the guys you've blown up, Mineta scowled. Kirishima ran up and punched a thug with chainsaw hands, known on the streets as chainsaw hands, oddly enough, in the face. I'm only 2 knockouts behind you. Just finish these guys off so we can get back to that portal asshole. Bakugo shouted as he unleashed 2 full-force explosions at some freaky fish guys. Geez, did you need our help or not? Mineta groaned, beginning to bleed lightly as he pulled more sticky balls from his head. So, Karo, how sure are you about this plan on a scale of 1 to 100? Tsuyu asked, crouching right behind the railing of the boat. Midoriya stopped and thought, spinning Mjolnir out of nervous habit. 1 to 100? Tsuyu nodded. I'd say maybe 46. Tsuyu made a croaking noise. Well, better than anything I can come up with. Without warning, the boat rocked violently. The two looked over the side of the ship to see some of the villains had gotten impatient and were trying to make the vessel sink. We're out of time. Deku grimaced. Ready? Tsuyu nodded, ready to leap off the railing. Midoriya took a deep breath and stepped onto the railing of the boat before jumping as high into the air as a god of thunder could, which was pretty high, all things considered. He sent an air blast downward at the water, making a divot in the lake which both propelled him upward and caused the villains to get pulled in together. I really hope this doesn't kill anyone, Midoriya gulped, flipping himself after he had burst himself into the air. He pointed Mjolnir straight down and sent a blast of lightning into the water. As the bolt zoomed downwards, Azui jumped onto the railing and made a flying leap towards the shore. She wrapped her tongue around Midoriya's waist and pulled him into her as the lightning struck the surface of the water, sending an electric current through the lake, zapping every villain in it. This worked on one level. Every villain in the water stopped moving. However, as Azui began to descend, it was clear they weren't going to make it all the way to the shore, and the water still seemed to be electrified. I can't let her get zapped. Midoriya panicked. Thinking quickly, Midoriya turned to Tsuyu, wrapped his left arm around her waist, and blasted another air current behind them in midair. He let Mjolnir fall to the ground as the two were propelled forward through the air and held onto her tightly. As they approached the ground, he turned their bodies so that he hit the ground first, and the two bounced and rolled through the bushes, away from the lake. When they finally stopped moving, the two had rolled with Azui on top of Deku, just as when they had first hit the ground. Deku groaned in pain, but thankfully his enchanted chainmail had absorbed a good deal of the impact. Ugh, are you okay, Azui? He looked up at her as she lifted her head off of him and realized that, while a bit scraped up, the most noticeable thing about her was how red her face had become. And it wasn't until noticing how large her eyes were up close to his that Midoriya realized a girl in a skin-tight outfit was laying right on top of him. His face promptly turned a bright red as well. Azui tried to answer him, but when she opened her mouth, an odd ribbit noise was made instead, prompting her to slap a hand over her mouth. Are you alright? Deku repeated, avoiding eye contact. She nodded, meekly. I'm going to get off you now, Karo. This is a little embarrassing. Midoriya couldn't help but agree as she got up. He got to his feet as well and summoned Mjolnir. The two left the brush and trees and looked back out at the lake, confirming they had not been pursued further. All the villains were still floating motionless in the water. We should get out of here and go for help, Karo, Azui suggested, pulling Deku's sleeve. No alarms have gone off, and we need to alert someone from the school. Right, Midoriya nodded, but looked over towards the entrance where Aizawa had been fighting. We need to check on Aizawa first. We can't just leave him there alone either. Are you crazy? We're no match for all those villains. Azui said, the best thing we could do is get reinforcements. No, I know, Midoriya conceded, rubbing the back of his neck. I just want to make sure he's not, you know? Azui's expression, while still stoic, softened slightly. Karo, okay, good point. We'll peek, but we should stay hidden. Midoriya agreed, and the two took off towards the center of the USJ. Chapter 7. The League of Villains. The last year of Midoriya's life was full of surprises. Finding Mjolnir, becoming the inheritor of the God of Thunder title, getting into UA, all things that would have surprised him if he could hop into a time machine and tell a younger version of himself. Surprises, however, are not always good. So when he and Azui peeked over the side of the terrain from a pond to see Mr. Aizawa getting absolutely thrashed by a great, hulking brute, Midoriya filed this one under. Incredibly unpleasant surprise. This creature, with skin black as coal, towered over Eraserhead and was seemingly immune to his gaze. Midoriya knew immediately that its quirk must have been mutative in nature for that to be the case, but the knowledge did nothing to numb the shock of what he was seeing. Aizawa, laying against the ground, having his face repeatedly slammed into the dirt by this monstrosity. Next to the monstrous thing was a boy somewhat older than the two of them. A creepy boy, at that. He was covered in hands that were gripped all over him, including one that was latched onto his face. Stringy white hairs surrounded the rest of his features, and he stared down at Aizawa. I always thought you were so cool, Eraserhead. He over, and as his bare hands touched Aizawa's goggles, they disintegrated away in his fingers. Midoriya had to hold in a gasp. The ability to rot away something at your touch was about as deadly as quirks could get. He'd take notes if it wasn't terrifying. Is that thing even human? Midoriya wondered, eyes darting around frantically as he sank into the water. Where are the teachers? Why aren't any alarms going off? He glanced over to see Azui looking almost as freaked out as he was. This looks bad. We need to get out of here, she whispered. Yeah, you scrubs shouldn't be here. Midoriya and Tsu both jumped back as the creepy boy stared down at them. He must have noticed and walked over. Those weaklings couldn't even get rid of level 1 noobs like you? Creepy handboy scoffed. What a complete waste of my time. Deku and Tsu both backed up slightly in the water, Midoriya gripping Mjolnir tightly. Well, doesn't matter, the creep snickered. It's game over for you. Let's see. He reached a hand his own forward, and a small portal opened up. Reaching through, his hand appeared directly over Azui's head. You first. Midoriya could see it unfolding in his head, Tsu just decomposing into dust and blowing away before his eyes. Immediately, his feet sprang into motion, and he jumped from the water, swinging his hammer towards Handyman's head. As he did, the monstrous quirk user ran from Aizawa's limp body and charged towards Deku. Midoriya, Azui cried, forgetting all her concern for her own well-being, and shooting her tongue towards Deku to reel him away. Neither were successful in this endeavor, either. As Midoriya swung, Mjolnir smashed into the side of the monstrous creature, who did not budge. Azui wrapped her tongue around Midoriya's midsection and pulled him back just as the white-haired teen grabbed her head. And nothing happened. The villain turned away and glared angrily to Aizawa had lifted his head, stopping his quirk. Frustrated, he stood up. Heh, Eraserhead. You just have to be so cool, don't you? He turned to the hulking beast, which was still peering down at the two students in the water. Nomu, finish him off. Midoriya and Azui backed away into the water, hearts pounding at their near brush with death. But then, a triumphant voice rang out across the USJ. For elsewhere in the dome, Ida had been successful in escaping and getting help. Students, fear not, for I am here. Everyone froze and turned towards the entrance, the villain stepping towards Aizawa in surprise. All Might, flanked by various other UA teachers, charged the USJ. All Might himself took one flying leap and landed in front of the pond with a loud crash. Young Midoriya and young Azui, All Might boomed, turning his head slightly towards the two in the pond. He shifted his body so that he was between the villains and the students. Thank you for holding them off. Please get your teacher to safety. I can handle this. The gravity of the situation hit Deku once he realized that for the first time, All Might was not wearing his trademark grin. He was playing for keeps. Azui, still with her tongue around Deku, pulled him out of the water and released him. The two wasted no time picking up their teacher as carefully as possible and began carrying him away from the battlefield. Not long, they could hear the sounds of a battle raging on. As they approached the entrance, Midoriya couldn't shake a lingering thought, though. All Might had steam coming off him as they had left. If he'd never met All Might before attending UA, he might not have taken notice of it. But that wasn't the case. He had met All Might in the past and became privy to All Might's horrible secret. If he's running out of time, Midoriya bit his lip as he helped Azui carry Aizawa. Hey, Azui, can you get Aizawa out of here? She paused at the request and looked back at him, her already large eyes widened a bit. Karo, what do you mean? You're not thinking of going back, are you? Those guys were dangerous, Midoriya said, quietly but firmly. If All Might needs backup, I think I might be able to help him. Azui looked at him, debating whether to let him go or to grab him with her tongue and restrain him for being insane. Well, you do have the coolest powers out of the class. In any other instance, Deku would be blushing, but he insisted further. You saw me hit that thing with my hammer. If it some negates physical attacks, All Might could be in trouble. I can provide distance support with lightning. Ziu frowned, but turned and shifted to carry Aizawa on her back. Please be careful, Karo. Right. Midoriya agreed, and turned to take back off towards the battlefield, heart pounding in his ears already. His knees shook. This was the real deal. Only once had he thwarted an attempt on his life, and that was a test more than anything else. Months prior, Deku approached the throne of Asgard, having been summoned via lightning bolt again. He was a bit surprised. Usually Thor greeted him right away, but this time the king of Asgard was sitting on his throne, staring down at the boy expectantly. And Midoriya couldn't shake the feeling that something about Thor was different. But what? Same eye patch, same beard, same everything. Why did his mentor seem different as he approached the throne of Asgard? Young Midoriya, there are matters we need to discuss, Thor said with an even tone, but his smile seemed rather hollow. Is everything okay? Indeed, we just need to discuss your schooling. Come, walk with me. Leave the hammer. You don't need it at the moment. This gave Midoriya even further pause. He always had Mjolnir with him, especially in Asgard. Still, he respected Thor and set Mjolnir down, and the two began walking towards a side hall. It was only when Midoriya looked at Thor, who was on his right-hand side, did he realize what was wrong. Thor was missing his right eye, but when looking at the left-hand profile of this Thor, the eye patch was on the left. At the realization, the fake Thor slid a knife from his sleeve and lunged for the boy's throat. Midoriya raised his hand, summoned Mjolnir, and was only just barely able to swing his hammer and knocked the blade from Thor's hand. Who are you? Midoriya shouted, jumping back and swinging his hammer. But the mood shifted as he heard a bellowing laughter and applause from the side hallway. Thor, the real Thor with his eye patch over his right eye, walked out, clapping. Midoriya looked back at the imposter Thor and watched as he appeared to melt into a new figure, an older man clad in a green robe. While his hair was long and black, there was plenty of strands of gray mixed in. Thought a horned helmet was covering it. "See, brother?" Thor laughed, walking over to Midoriya and the fake. "I told you he'd see right through your illusions." "Uft," scoffed the robed man. "I nearly had the boy's neck. Besides, I gave him an easy one." "What?" Midoriya uttered, completely flabbergasted by the ruse, before his eyes widened and the realization set in. "Wait a minute. Are you Loki?" "Yes, what are you doing?" Loki asked, bewildered, as Midoriya pulled a tattered notebook from his pocket and flipped to an old page. "I have so many questions about your magic and illusions," Midoriya asked, excitedly, showing Loki all of his notes from years past. "You were like the coolest villain in Quirk's history." Thor just smiled and shook his head as Loki puffed up his chest in arrogance. He had a feeling Midoriya would win him over pretty easily. Present day. Midoriya peeked through the bushes at the battle scene, deciding the element of surprise was the best weapon at his disposal. To his surprise, he found he wasn't the only student who had come to assist All Might. All Might had hit the monster which Creepy Hands had named Nomu with a picture-perfect German suplex with a bridge. Any pro wrestling commentator would surely be beside themselves at such wonderful form, declaring it a slobberknocker. And when the move landed, a sheet of ice had enclosed the Nomu, leading back to its source, Todoroki. When did he get here? Midoriya wondered. I've only been gone a few minutes, tops. Suddenly, a portal opened beneath the Nomu, and it was able to escape as All Might scrambled to his feet. Todoroki backed up in surprise as well. He tried to spread more ice across the ground to trap the monster, but Nomu thrust both fists into the ground, splitting the ice. "Get back, Todoroki," All Might commanded. "I'll handle this." Todoroki looked rather uneasy at the command, but backed away as requested. Next to Creepy Hands, a man in a sharp business suit who appeared to be made of purple smog stepped out of another portal. "This is bad," Shigaraki, Smogman said to Creepy Hands, who Midoriya realized must have been Shigaraki. "We should consider a retreat." "But Kurogiri," Shigaraki sneered, "the final boss is right in front of us. I can't take the game over now." "Stop speaking in video game references, you creepy fuck." Midoriya jumped from his hiding spot and grimaced. Such rage could only mean one thing. Bakugo was rocketing towards Shigaraki and Kurogiri, ready to unleash explosive fury upon them. Kurogiri opened a portal in the air, and Shigaraki reached his hand through as another portal appeared in the air in front of Bakugo. Shigaraki was trying to use the same trick to get Bakugo as he had attempted on Azui. Bakugo was expecting this, though, as he thrust a hand upward and used an angled explosion to propel himself under Shigaraki's hand and in front of Kurogiri, unleashing a second explosion with his free hand. Kurogiri, taken by surprise, was thrust backward, his portals failing. Shigaraki was only just able to pull his hand free in time. "I've been watching you, you smoky sheetass. Your body is your weak part." Bakugo, despite having taken down Kurogiri, learned that talking is not a free action. The Nomu had sprung forward and uppercut the blonde student into the air, and the boy landed against the terrain with a hard thud. As the Nomu advanced for a further attack, it was intercepted by All Might with a cry of "Detroit Smoz." But the Nomu barely flinched, absorbing. Bakugo was still reeling as Shigaraki approached him. "What a nuisance you are," Shigaraki scoffed. "I'll show you what I do with nuisances." As Shigaraki leaned forward to erase Bakugo from existence, Midoriya sprang into action. Leaping from the hedges, his eyes glowed blue as he cried, "I say the NAY." A blast of lightning surged from Mjolnir at his words, hitting Shigaraki on the side of the head and sending him sprawling across the rocks and dirt. The hand that was mounted on Shigaraki's face went flying off and landed a few feet next to him. The Nomu looked to his master enraged and charged Midoriya, who sent another blast of lightning. This one hit the Nomu in its knee, sending it crashing into a kneeling position. All Might dashed up behind it. Power absorption is your quirk, huh, big fella? Well, let's see the limits. Before the Nomu could recover, All Might began raining blows upon the beast-like man, hitting the same spot faster than the eye could see in the back of its head. A hard blow sent it flying forwards towards Deku, who was ready. Spinning Mjolnir at his side, he swung it upwards and uppercut Nomu with his hammer. Lightning crackled as Nomu went flying into the air, falling down towards All Might. Detroit. All Might cried, preparing an uppercut of his own. SMASH. All Might's blow proved decisive, sending Nomu rocketing out of the building and crashing through a skylight. All Might and Deku turned towards Shigaraki and Kurogiri to see they had recovered. Shigaraki sat up as Kurogiri ran over to him. "Boss, this is bad. We need to leave." Shigaraki, however, wasn't listening, scrambling across the ground, decaying bits and pieces of it. "Father," he muttered, "where are you, father?" Finally, upon finding the hand that covered his face, he grabbed it gingerly, with one pinky extended. He raised his head and glared at Midoriya, freezing the green-haired boy in his tracks. Midoriya had never seen so much hatred in someone's eyes before that day. In his shock, he dropped Mjolnir at his side. "Let's get out of here, Kurogiri," Shigaraki scowled, placing the hand firmly back upon his face. "Not so fast," All Might cried, dashing for the two head villains, but it was too late. A portal opened beneath the two, and they had vanished. "Damn," he cursed under his breath. "I've lost a step or two, haven't I?" He turned to Midoriya and beamed, placing a hand on his shoulder, and spoke in a low tone. "Thank you for your assistance, young Midoriya. I see Thor has taught you quite well." And then All Might did something that rendered Deku completely speechless. He leaned down, picked up Mjolnir, and handed it to Midoriya. Deku's jaw dropped. "How did you?" All Might just laughed as Izuku stared at him with a slack-jawed expression. "Oh, I'll explain another time." He turned to Todoroki and spoke louder. "And you as well, young Todoroki. Your help was invaluable." The taller teen walked up the two and merely nodded. "Well, glad to assist. We should go make sure your classmate, young Bakugo, is okay." "Oh man, here he is." Another voice called out from the bushes. From the brush, Kirishima emerged with Mineta in tow. "I told Bakugo not to run off without us." Whoa. He looked around, seeing All Might, Deku, and Todoroki standing amidst a destroyed area. What did I miss? As the students all gathered and reconvened, Midoriya was surprised to hear how all of his classmates had fared when they all became separated. Uraraka regaled the class with how they distracted Kurogiri long enough for Ida to escape. Kaminari bragged about he, Yaozu, and Jiro took down a big group, though Jiro kept interrupting to advise how he was mostly useless until Momo had crafted an insulated blanket to protect them from his electricity. Hagakure gushed over watching Todoroki freeze a horde of thugs, though he was shocked she was even there. Everyone seemed to have run into a struggle, but no one in the class was any worse for wear, other than Aizawa, who would be in a body cast for some time. Of course, Midoriya was also thoroughly embarrassed when Tsuyu talked about how awesome Deku's own plan to escape Shipwreck Zone while simultaneously frying an entire squad of aquatic villains was. "Two couldn't have done it without you," Midoriya assured her through his terrible blushing. "I'd have been dead if you hadn't saved me in the first place." "It sounds like you two make a great team." Uraraka beamed, causing Azui to blush a bit as well. The moment was ruined when Mineta literally forced himself between the two of them to argue. "I think you and I could make a much better team, right, Azui?" She grabbed him and threw him into the seat behind her, prompting Midoriya and Uraraka to laugh. Midoriya slumped backwards into his seat and let out a sigh. "I'll have to make sure I tell Thor about my first run-in with a supervillain," he thought to himself. Chapter 8, called out. "So his mask was a hand, and he kept calling it father?" Thor asked, biting into Inko's cooking as the three of them sat around the table. Trust me from all my years in battle with Loki. Whoever that villain is must be plagued with what you Midgardians call daddy issues." Midoriya snorted into his rice. "Izuku," Inko scolded, though she was smiling herself, though her tone and expression became more somber as she picked at her own plate. "Still, this is the second time I've had to get notified of an incident." Isn't UA supposed to be a safe facility? The USJ is an off-site facility, Mom, Izuku assured her, and they've tightened security a lot since the incident with the reporters. Well, okay, his mother conceded. But I hope I don't see anything further about break-ins or endangerment or… She was interrupted as Thor reached over and grabbed her shoulder, gently. Inko, if I may be so bold, young Midoriya here has chosen a life that entails many dangers and hardships. She turned red. I know. I can't help but worry. School should be the place where he is the safest. Well, I suppose that makes sense, Thor conceded. I will keep an eye on things in the next few days. Make sure there's no trouble. Midoriya nearly gagged. What exactly did that mean? He just hoped Thor wouldn't go picking fights with anyone. I appreciate that, Inko sighed in relief. I do admit, I feel better when you're around. I'm going to vomit. Midoriya put his head in his hands. Please stop flirting. The two adults laughed. As he cleared the dishes, Midoriya whispered that he needed to ask Thor something about what had happened at the USJ. Thor, to his credit, nodded solemnly and invited Midoriya to take a walk with him after he had finished cleaning up. Don't be gone too long. You have homework to finish, Inko advised, but her tone wasn't overly stern. She knew very well Midoriya was a diligent student. Once outside, Midoriya made sure no one was in earshot before turning to his mentor. So, I told you about helping All Might and the villains, but he said he knew about you choosing me. It sounded like you guys go back a ways. Thor's expression stiffened, and he looked away. Yes, lad. I met Toshinori back when he first started his heroics, and he started calling himself the symbol of peace. Bit of a brag, a name like that, Thor added, with a sneer, and I go around announcing myself as God of Thunder. Midoriya looked ahead. It was nice to have confirmation of his suspicions, but that wasn't the only thing bugging him either. It's just that, well… He stopped in his tracks, and Thor walked forward a bit more before turning and realizing his young ward wasn't next to him. Yes? He lifted Mjolnir. Midoriya admitted. I don't understand. Thor signed, closing his eyes and looking downwards. After a few moments' pause, he turned to a bench nearby and sat. I don't think I explained properly, but Mjolnir is not bound to just one soul. Well, you said I could lift it because I'm worthy, right? Midoriya asked. Does that mean more than one person can be worthy? Thor nodded, a small smile flickering across his face. You learn quickly. Loki was right. You're so different from how I was when young. He likes that about you. He looked to the sky. The sun was setting, bathing the two in orange and pink hues as they spoke. Yes, it's exceedingly rare for someone to be worthy. But even as I wielded Mjolnir, I knew a few others who were worthy. Captain America included. I see. Midoriya frowned. Even as rare as it was, he couldn't help but sense the familiar feelings of self-doubt set in. But how do we know I'm the right one? Maybe someone better is worthy. No, Thor replied bluntly. There was a heavy pause. After a minute, Deku said, can you elaborate? Thor laughed. There is no one better out there right now to wield Mjolnir than you. How do I know? Thor chuckled again, stood up, and placed a hand on Deku's shoulder. Because I know you, young Midoriya. I trust you and your heroic spirit. Heat climbed to Midoriya's cheeks, and he sniffed a bit, but held back the tears. So, what does that have to do with you and All Might? Thor frowned and turned, the two continuing their walk. It was probably 20 years ago or so, maybe more. Early during All Might's career, I offered him the chance to be my successor. Midoriya tripped over his own feet in surprise. You wanted All Might to be the God of Thunder? He asked, clambering back to his feet. Aye, lad. Thor nodded. He had just emerged onto the hero scene, and his abilities and drive to make the land a better place resonated with me. I appeared before him and his own mentor one evening, and tested him to see if he was worthy. When he lifted Mjolnir, I assured him he could have the powers of the God of Thunder at his disposal. And Deku asked, gently. The topic seemed sensitive. He said no. Thor answered, trying to keep his cool, but Midoriya could see from the Asgardian's clenched fists that he was still bitter over the whole ordeal. Said he didn't need it, and that he believed it was too much power for one man to hold in addition to his own abilities. Oh, It was about all Midoriya could think to say, and it was a lot to process. Certainly, All Might didn't need any abilities to be the #1 hero. Then again, he had also suffered a game-breaking injury and could only perform heroics for a limited time each day. Maybe if he had chosen to accept the position, things would have been different. It also wasn't hard to see why Thor might have chosen All Might in the first place. They were more similar the more Midoriya got to know them. Boisterous blonde powerhouses that saved people and protected society with power. Midoriya. He could see why Thor would be upset about the whole thing too. The offer to be God of Thunder would be something of a dream come true, no matter what your quirk was. To turn it down would have had to have felt like one of the biggest snubs in existence. Midoriya, you've been muttering this whole time. Thor interrupted, less than amused. Deku looked up, surprised. Oh shoot, I was saying all of that out loud. Thor nodded. Yeah, you were. You need to knock that off. It's weird for you to talk about me like I'm not here. Look, that stuff doesn't matter. Ultimately, it works out. Because I met you, and you've taken up the mantle. Deku gave a sad laugh. Are you sure? I mean, I'm not really anything like you, Thor. One might say that's a good thing. Both Thor and Deku jumped at the voice. The tree that had been next to the bench they were sitting on earlier suddenly began to change, shifting back into Loki. Deku beamed at seeing him, but Thor just rolled an eye. Don't you have anything better to do? Eavesdropping on emotional conversations falls under the realm of God of Mischief, Loki smirked. Besides, I do love to revel in your failures, brother. He turned to Deku. You being unlike this oaf is probably the best thing that Hammer has done in 1,000 years. Midoriya laughed nervously, and to his surprise, Thor did too. You know, Thor said, for once, I agree with you, Loki. At the look of surprise on his brother's face, Thor continued. I made many mistakes as a hero, young Midoriya. Loki here was, well, the brains of the family. I caused a lot of problems with my approach of Zap first, questions later. I trust that you will be much more than I ever could be. Midoriya's eyes watered, and he was rendered speechless. Thankfully, Loki broke the silence with a scoff. Way to make my insult into an emotional speech. Midoriya wiped his eyes and smiled. Right. I'll do my best, you guys. We should head back. I need to think of a hero name. They're going to have us pick them by the end of the term. Half the class thinks my name is actually Deku. Thor scoffed. Isn't that the thing Kacho calls you? Yeah, Kakin has been calling me that since we were kids. Midoriya sighed. His way of calling me a quirkless nobody. Loki's expression soured. He what? Thor grinned. Well, I certainly bet he regrets telling you to kill yourself now that you've shown him up so much. A knife slid out of Loki's sleeve, and he began scanning buildings. Where does this Kacho fellow live? Maybe we should give him a talking to. No, that's not necessary. Deku blurted out as Thor bellowed with laughter. As they followed the God of Mischief, Thor turned to Deku and asked, with a mischievous grin of his own, so tell me about this Thew girl. Sounds like you're rather taken with her. Deku's face burned brightly. Stop. Later that night, Midoriya laid in his bed, staring up at the ceiling. To think All Might could have been God of Thunder and the symbol of peace all this time. He rolled to his side and wondered what would have become of him if that had happened. What would have changed? Unable to sleep, he stood up and walked over to his desk. He reached in one of the drawers to find a list of hero names he wanted to use as a kid, most of them rip-offs of All Might's name. Small Might, All Might Jr., the second coming of All Might, the Almighty One, Might Kid, Dino Might, Brawl Might, and Guy Might. I can't believe Mom never threw this out, he whispered to the darkness of his room. Still, he had a few months to worry about it. By that time, maybe he'd make it known he'd inherited the title of God of Thunder. Young man and young lady, aren't you part of Class 1A, the ones that were attacked? A reporter screamed in Deku's face as he turned the corner to approach Yue. Azui had met up with him on the walkover, and the two did their best to ignore the newscaster's questions, as they had for the rest of the week following the USJ incident. Karo, it can't be this slow of a news week, Thew grumbled, loud enough for everyone to hear. It did nothing to dissuade the paparazzi, but it drew a laugh from Midoriya. No, I can't wait for these walks to become quiet again. Ever since the USJ incident, a few things had changed for the kids of Class 1A, and the media attention was the biggest of those changes. While Aizawa and their principal encouraged the children to leave any media contact to the school, a few classmates seemed to revel in the spotlight, Ashido, Hagakure, and Kaminari in particular. Get that microphone out of my face before I blow it up your ass. Azui and Midoriya looked up to see Bakugo entering the gate, threatening the reports as he had every other day that week. I think he used that one already, Karo, Azui quipped, drawing a laugh from Midoriya. While not all the changes were positive, Deku certainly didn't mind having company on his morning walks. There's only so many places he can say he'll shove a microphone, too. He mentally congratulated himself for remembering to use her given name. Once inside, more exciting news awaited them. You may need to deal with the press a bit longer, Aizawa yawned from his sleeping bag. They're going to resurge, I'm sure, as we begin preparations for the sports festival. Midoriya's heart jumped into his throat as the class cheered. He loved the sports festival. It was one of his favorite televised events of the year. Watching the brilliant students of UA fight each other with unique quirks and techniques was one of the driving factors of him choosing UA in the first place. He glanced around the class. His classmates felt about the same way he did. Finally, a chance to show off on the grand stage. Aoyama declared, tossing his hair in an attempt to seem elegant. Yeah, sure, whatever, Aizawa sighed. Your internships will be coming up after the festival, which will gear you towards valuable experience towards finals. Lots of pros and their organizations will be watching, so make sure you have a good showing and you'll get some better offers. Murmurs went around the class, but they were interrupted as President Mike opened the door. Who's ready for Shakespeare? The murmurs were replaced with groans, although not from Midoriya. He was still too excited to let even the bard himself get him down. The day had come to an end, and students of Class 1A were packing up. Midoriya still had a wide grin on his face as he got ready to walk home with Uraraka, Ida, and Azui, as he did every day. But today, as he stood up, someone else called out for him. Midoriya. Deku looked around, confused, before realizing the call had come from Todoroki, standing in the back of the room. He realized he didn't recognize it because usually Todoroki spoke in a low voice, and this might have been the first time Izuku had ever heard him project. What's up, Todoroki? I am going to crush you at the sports festival, he declared in an icy tone that threw Midoriya off. The students around him all fell silent and looked on. This was some fresh drama for sure. What? Midoriya responded, confused. Me? You're All Might's favorite, aren't you? Todoroki sneered. Todoroki, what are you even talking about? Kirishima asked from a few desks away. All Might told me to stay away from the villains at the USJ, the boy with the two-tone bowl cut answered, but when Midoriya steps in to help, he pats him on the shoulder. Midoriya heard Bakugo stand up behind him and stomp towards the door. Now why is he pissed off? Todoroki, I was just in the right place at the right time. It doesn't matter, either way, Todoroki said with a shrug. I'm going to make an example out of you and prove myself as the next #1 hero. With that, Todoroki grabbed his bag and walked towards Bakugo at the door, but both of them stopped as Bakugo threw it open. About 20 students stood outside the door, staring in at who they could see. Midoriya and his friends moved behind Todoroki and Bakugo to see what the commotion was. These 20 students had expressions ranging from anger to nervousness, though a few looked rather bored about the whole thing. So, this is the famous Class 1A, is it? A blond boy towards the front said, feigning admiration. The talk of the whole school? I'll school your face if you don't get out of my way. Bakugo screamed, but this just made the crowd of students close and tighter. What's your problem? Todoroki asked impatiently. Kind of hypocritical, right? Midoriya whispered, prompting Tsu to snicker. Our problem is how much stock everyone is putting into Class 1A. The blond boy exclaimed, pointing dramatically. No one is even talking about what we can do in Class 1B. Monoma, this is stupid, sighed a red-haired girl in the back of the crowd. Ida cleared his throat, clearly feeling the need to flex his class president status. I'm sure there is an amicable way we can resolve any hostilities. That was as far as he got before Bakugo shoved the boy named Monoma aside. Whatever. I'm going to kick everyone's ass anyway. Move it, nerd. The rest of Class 1B got out of his way, but they all stopped to glare daggers at the rest of Class 1A as they walked out of the room. Great. Now we're all going to have targets on our backs compared to the rest of the first years, Uraraka sighed as they reached the front of the school. It sounds like we already do, Ida said. I don't think Monoma is the only one who thinks we're glory hounds after our first real encounter with real villains. I've gotten recognized on the train a few times, Karo, Tiu added. I can see why they'd be jealous. Exposure is important for being a pro hero. She turned to Deku. Still, if that's the case, I wonder what Todoroki's problem is. Yeah, Deku, did something happen to you guys at the USJ? Uraraka asked. Midoriya shook his head. Nope, we've never even had a conversation before now. He's not someone to take lightly, Ida sighed. Remember Aizawa's testing of our skills. He's the strongest person in our class. Deku can take him. Uraraka fist pumped. But none of that matters, because I'm going to win the whole thing. The friends laughed and began talking more about the sports festival, but Midoriya couldn't get what Todoroki had said to him out of his head, that he would make an example out of Deku. He looked down at Mjolnir. I think I'll train with Thor and Valkyrie some more tonight. Chapter 9, Sports Joust. Festival. So this is a joust? Valkyrie asked, looking from her ticket to the numbered seats. No, it's more like a tournament, Thor answered, finding his own seat and sitting down. Midoriya explained it already, Loki sighed, sitting between the two. It ends with a tournament, but there are preliminary rounds since the amount of first years is large. Does winning grant some kind of rank promotion? Valkyrie asked, reaching over Loki to grab some popcorn from Thor, much to Loki's annoyance. It's more about scouting and public exposure so that companies will want to hire them out of school as heroes and such, Thor answered. And a monetary prize, Loki added, digging a hand in Thor's popcorn tub. You know, why didn't you two get your own? Thor grumbled. He then turned to Inko, seated at his other side. Would you like some? Loki rolled his eyes at the display. Inko grabbed a small handful. Thank you for the tickets, Thor. I can't wait to watch my boy in action. This is much better than watching at home. I just hope he'll be all right. Screw just being all right. For how much training I've put him through the last few weeks, he better win, Valkyrie laughed. Midoriya approached the starting line, the rest of Class 1A on either side of him. Past them were students of the support courses, general classes, and the rest of the first years. He scanned the competition and saw Todoroki a few paces away. I already know his opening strategy, Midoriya thought. He crouched at the line and waited for the siren to note the beginning of the race. The siren blared and, as Midoriya expected, Todoroki charged forward, thrust his right arm backwards, and sent a wall of ice behind him to entrap as many first years as he could. Midoriya stepped forward and slammed his hammer against the ground. A shock wave disrupted the earth and shattered enough of the ice for him to charge though. In his peripheral vision, he could see smoke from an explosion and Bakuga break through, as did some of the others from his class. With no time to think, he gave chase to Todoroki and rounded a corner, hearing a chorus of gasps come from behind him. Hidden from sight due to the curvature of the landscape was a valley full of zero-pointer robots. They use these for sport now, Kaminari cried from a few feet away. Todoroki didn't let it slow him down. He used his ice to create a slide of sorts to zip past and around the legs of the zero-pointers. Inspired, Ashido did the same thing, and Siro himself used his tape to latch onto the legs of a robot and swing between them. Midoriya began to swing Mjolnir at his side, but before he could even formulate an attack plan, he was almost deafened as a blast rang out from about 10 meters to his right. He looked over to see Yaoyorozu had created a naval cannon from her stomach and was shooting holes in each zero-pointer. As the robots began to collapse, Midoriya began racing forward again, swinging Mjolnir overhead to destroy debris and knock it out of his way. Don't need to fight them, just need to get through. As he cleared the robots, he came to another hazard, a canyon that needed to be crossed, with various pillars scattered across it. Todoroki himself had already cleared this and dismantled his ice bridge so no one could follow. Suck it, nerd. Bakuga shouted as he brushed past Midoriya, using explosions to propel himself from one pillar to another. He looked back and gave Deku the middle finger. Shoot, Midoriya cursed. There's no way I can use wind boosts to get all the way over there. Come on, Midoriya. A voice came from behind him, making him jump. He turned to see Azui rush past him and use her frog jump to make it across to another pillar herself. As he watched her, a girl with pink hair walked past him, aiming some sort of shoulder-mounted rifle. Look out, Hammer Bro. He took a step back as the girl, who he realized must have been a support student due to the amount of headgear and mechanical equipment she had strapped to her, shot a grappling hook from her mounted gun and then planted the line on the ground. Without another word, she began balancing across it. Midoriya looked around to see other students figuring out ways across. He couldn't stop here. With no other choice, he set Mjolnir down, stepped on top of the line after her, and began following her. You better not knock me off balance. She scowled over her shoulder. Midoriya said nothing, just looked straight ahead at the thin line he was trying to cross, not answering the young woman ahead. Why isn't he just flying? Loki asked, squinting at the screen. He doesn't know how yet, Valkyrie answered. Doesn't know? What are you teaching him? Loki rounded on Thor. It's been over a year, and you haven't taught him flight? Flying isn't easy, Thor defended, scooting away. It's a harness of wind energy within, and it's indescribable as a feeling. It's not easy to teach because of that. I've tried. Loki just stared at his brother with eyes that said, Are you shitting me? About halfway across the canyon, the line Midoriya and pink-haired support girl were crossing shook violently, threatening to knock the two down. Midoriya looked back in horror to see the blonde boy from Class 1B Monoma stomping on the line to try and knock it off balance. That motherfucker, Midoriya whispered. He usually wasn't one for swearing. Hearing it from Bakugo all of his life made it seem distasteful. But as the line snapped, he repeated, that motherfucker. As he began to tumble downwards, he heard the high-pitched yelp of the girl in front of him. No one was around to save them. It's up to me, he realized as the blood began to rush to his ears. Holding out his hand, he summoned Mjolnir to his hand, never taking his eyes off the pink-haired girl in front of him. As the hammer met his palm, he thrust it forward, riding the wind and momentum to dive towards her. He wrapped his left arm around her waist and then pointed Mjolnir upwards. The two rose above the canyon and landed. Midoriya spun the hammer above his head, gently descending as the two landed on the other side of the clearing. As he released the girl, he was hit with realization and he stopped to stare at Mjolnir. He had flown. The girl with the pink hair gave him a big smile. Thanks. You sure seem handy to be around. Catch you later. He snapped himself out of his amazement and looked behind him. Most of the first years were still struggling with the canyon, but he could hear President Mike announcing that the leaders of the race had made it to the next obstacle. He looked down at his hammer and grinned. Why bother running? He spun Mjolnir at his side and thrust it forward, lifting himself off the ground and flying forward. As he flew a few feet over Azui's head, he turned and gave her a small wave as she croaked in surprise. Since when can you do that? Karo, she shouted. It's new, he yelled behind him. See, look, he can fly. Thor laughed triumphantly. PSH, you didn't have any part of it, Loki scoffed, but he couldn't hide his own grin. As Midoriya flew to the last challenge before reaching the arena, a minefield, he saw Todoroki and Bakugo slowly walking over the field to avoid explosions. Deku wasted no time soaring over their heads, and in midair, turned to make eye contact with Bakugo. Midoriya gave him a middle finger in return, grinning as he turned back and heard the sounds of explosions behind him. He wasn't sure if they were Bakugo or the minefield, but was too far ahead for either of them to catch now. And Midoriya Izuku makes it to the arena first. President Mike screamed to the crowd, who cheered along with him. Midoriya turned to see other hordes of students emerge into the arena after him. On a giant screen over the stands, rankings began to fly on the screen as the last desperate push came in from the first years of UA. Deku, we made it, he heard from off to his side. He turned and beamed to see Uraraka, Ida, and Tsuyu running towards him. Awesome. Ida nodded, but seemed to take no joy in finishing near the top of rankings. I thought my quirk was well suited to a race, but the canyon and minefield admittedly put me at a disadvantage. Speaking of advantages, since when can you fly? Uraraka cried, hitting Deku lightly on the shoulder as students began to crowd around further. To be honest, I don't know what happened, Midoriya laughed, embarrassed. That guy from Class 1B sabotaged a rope I was using across the canyon, and me and some girl started falling. I just kind of freaked out and flew. Hopefully that helps you in the next part of the tournament, Karo, Tiu said, tapping her finger to her mouth. After all, supposedly the challenges are made with all quirks in mind. See, look at that. Thor boomed with laughter, standing up and dumping the remainder of his popcorn tub on the poor sap in front of him. He's winning. Inko said nothing next to that, just cried quietly, mouth open in a wide-eyed smile. That was just a preliminary though, right? Valkyrie asked. So how do they start ruling people out? If you just listen, the weird woman in the white bodysuit will tell us, Loki sighed, pointing to a podium where pro hero and teacher Midnight was announcing the next face of the sports festival, the cavalry battle. And the point headbands will increase in value in incremental points, Midnight explained to the crowd and the contestants, before making direct eye contact with Midoriya. With the exception of our current first-place student, UC Midoriya Izuku, your headband will be worth a whopping 1 million points. The crowd cheered, but Deku could feel every student in the arena turn and glare at him with hungry eyes. Despite being in his gym clothes like everyone else, he felt incredibly naked under the gaze of the entire freshman class. He gulped as he tried to stammer out a response, neat. Midnight laughed. Is there anything you want to say to the crowd before the cavalry battle begins? Midoriya choked nervously, but the microphone didn't make it to him before Bakugo ripped it from Midnight's outstretched hand. You, he screamed, pointing right at Midoriya. Me? Midoriya asked, bewildered, pointing at himself. Who's the anger management case? Valkyrie asked, disdainfully. I believe that's Kacho, isn't it, brother? Loki sneered. Aye, that is indeed young Kacho, Thor nodded, before loudly shouting, Bo. Inko held in a laugh as Loki and Valkyrie joined in. A few rows down, Bakugo Mitsuki turned and glared at the god of thunder. Foreigners, Mrs. Bakugo muttered under her breath. I'm going to personally rip that headband right of your shitty forehead. Bakugo growled for the whole arena to hear. I'll beat you, and everyone else here. He turned and grit his teeth at the rest of the first years, a few of them stepping away. Because I am the strongest, and I am going to be the #1 hero. He sent an explosion over his head for show. The other first years began to shout back at him. So he shouted, once more, you don't like it? Well, that's too damn bad. He dropped the microphone and stormed off. Midoriya's nerves were replaced by the sound of thunder in his head and the feeling of his blood boiling. He bent down and grabbed the microphone. Hey! Bakugo turned as Midoriya spoke, the two boys making eye contact. If you think you can take this headband from me, you're more than welcome to try. Midoriya challenged in an even tone, handing the mic back to Midnight and picking up Mjolnir. You could almost hear Bakugo's teeth grinding from the stands. As Midoriya turned, he could see Todoroki at the front of the crowd of first years, glaring at him. That goes for you too, he said, just loud enough for Todoroki to hear. Such machismo. Midnight squealed. I love it. You all have 15 minutes to pick teams. As the students dispersed into small groups, Midoriya retreated to his group of friends. Well, I think you got under his skin, Karo, Azui said, putting her finger to her chin. Should the four of us make a team? Midoriya's expression shifted to a grin. That would be awesome. There's no one I'd trust more than you guys. The two turned to Uraraka and Ida, but their friends were both not looking nearly as confident. Guys, Midoriya asked. Look, Deku, Uraraka began, rubbing her arm. Ida and I were talking earlier today, and we don't want to feel like we're living in your shadow, Ida finished. Shadow? He echoed. If we team with you, everyone will be focused on you and your bounty, Uraraka explained. This is our big chance. I'm sorry, but I'm going to go see if I can team with someone else. Right. You're my friend, but you're my rival too, Ida said, turning away. Tellingly, though, he couldn't look Deku in the eyes as he said that. It took Midoriya a minute to process this as he watched his friends walk off, fighting the urge to cry. He had grown used to people not wanting to team with him when he grew up quirkless, but this time stung in particular. He didn't turn to Azui as he asked, because he was afraid of her answer. Do you want to team with someone else too, Tsu? There was a brief pause. but he felt a bit relieved as he felt her hand slightly larger than average grab his shoulder. "Don't worry, Karo. I've got your back." He sniffed. "Thanks, see you. Let's find some more." Look no further. Midoriya and Azui both jumped at the loud voice that had sprang up behind them. It was the support girl from earlier, the one with the pink hair and tech around her waist. "Oh, hey, it's you." Midoriya smiled. "Glad you're okay." "I'm glad you were there with that nifty flying hammer." The girl beamed, extending her hand. "Hatsune, at your service. Remember the name, because you'll be coming to me and my babies for all your support gear soon." Midoriya shook her hand, but exchanged unsure glances with Azui as he did. "Nice to meet you, Hatsune." She introduced herself and shook hands with Azui. "Now look, you guys should have me on your team. I've got these." She pointed to the giant metallic boots on her feet. Anti-gravity boost boots for high jumps and slow falls. With Tsuyu's jumping and your wind control, we'll practically be able to fly. "That sounds great, Karo," Azui replied. "But do they work?" "Of course they work." Hatsum grinned. "They've worked in 6 out of every 10 trial runs." "I would hope for better," Deku said. "Hey, 60% of the time, they work every time," Hatsum argued. "Besides, let me help you out for helping me out." Midoriya and Azui looked at each other and shrugged. "All right, Hatsum, welcome aboard." Midoriya smiled. "We should get one more person here to act as defense. Put them in front. Do you have any ideas?" "PSH, no?" Hatsum rolled her eyes. "People suck. I usually just hang out with my babies." Cool, cool, cool." Midoriya sighed. The three of them went around to some of the other students of Class 1A, realizing they only had 5 minutes left. They tried Tokoimi first, but he was teaming with Shuji and Mineta. Todoroki himself had already nabbed Ida, Uraraka, and Kaminari. Bakugo had already secured Shiro, Kirishima, and Ishido as well. "Sorry, man," Shiro had said, scratching his neck. "If I knew you had wanted to team up, I would have said no to Bakugo. If I backed out now, I think he'd blow me to hell." "It's cool," Midoriya sighed, and looked to his left. And then he saw him. A grin broke out on his face, and he ran, taking Azui and Hatsum by surprise. "Hey!" He made his way over to Aoyama and grabbed his shoulder. "Hey!" Aoyama jumped and whipped around. "You startled me, Midoriya." "Sorry, but I think you'd be perfect for our team," Deku pleaded, leaving out the part where he'd said the same thing to Tokoimi a few minutes ago. A giant smile spread over Aoyama's face. "Finally, I should have known it'd be Mon Ami that would see the glory I can bring to a cavalry team." This took Midoriya by surprise a bit. "No one asked you yet." "None, I even asked around. People underestimate the power of my twinkle cannon." "His what?" Midoriya blinked. By now, Azui and Hatsum had caught up to them, and Hatsum was eyeing the boy up and down. "You sure this is our guy, Midoriya?" "Absolutely," Midoriya assured him. "I've got a plan, guys. Listen." Chapter 10. Here Comes the Cavalry. As Deku sat on the shoulders of his cavalry teammates, he felt incredibly awkward. With Two by his left-hand side, Hatsum on his right, and Aoyama bringing up the front, he shifted uncomfortably as the girls grabbed his sides. "So we all know the plan, right?" he asked his teammates. "We." Karo was accompanied with a nod. "Got it." Midoriya stared out as the other teams readied themselves. All of them were staring back as he tied the million-point headband around his head. "Believe it," he whispered to himself. Bakugo and Todoroki were similarly glaring at Midoriya with contempt, making up the second and third place teams, respectively. He knew he had just placed a target on his head, but if the plan worked, they just had to survive for 15 minutes. "Teams, are you ready?" Midnight yelled. "Because I think the audience is." The audience swelled with yells and applause. "Go!" Midnight screamed. As the teams all bum-rushed Midoriya's team, he used a gust of wind at the ground to his right as Azui jumped with all her strength. The combined might of this sent the team about 2 stories off the ground, at which point Hatsum activated the slow fall of her boost boots. Midoriya spun Mjolnir overhead. He couldn't fly while carrying all of them, but with the tech helping, they were able to hover in the air. As the teams converged below on the spot where Deku's team had been, chaos broke out, just like Deku had hoped for. Monoma of Class 1B stole Bakugu's headband and took off, prompting the explosive hothead to steer his team away to give chase. "Give it back here, you fuck! I'll kill you!" Bakuga screamed after Monoma. Suddenly, from the ground, a flurry of purple spheres and an angry shadow bird came rushing towards them. "Aoyama now?" Deku shouted. Aoyama shot his naval laser at Dark Shadow, the light from the attack cutting through the dark creature and forcing him back. The force from the laser also pushed the group away from Mineta's sticky balls as they fell short in the air. They repeated this strategy a few times to get away from some long-range quirks. "So far, so good, Captain." Hatsum laughed. 10 minutes to go." "Guys, look!" Azui cried. From below, a ramp formed out of ice, and they heard Ida shout something. "What did he say?" Hatsum asked. "Recipe Turbo Holy Shit." Todoroki's entire team, led by Ida, was boosted up the ice ramp. They zoomed past Midoriya's team, and in midair, Todoroki grabbed Deku's headband with his left hand. It was over as soon as Deku had blinked. "Wait, what?" "Midoriya, we fell to 6th place." Azui cried. Deku began to panic. He turned around and saw Todoroki had made an ice ramp for his team to slide down. "No." Without a second thought, he threw Mjolnir, shattering the ice ramp, causing Todoroki's team to begin to fall. Uraraka quickly used her quirk to make them all float, but she looked ready to throw up. Midoriya dove away from his group and called Mjolnir to him. He flew through the air and towards the team, snatching his headband out of Todoroki's outstretched hand. As he flew past the team, he saw his team go back up into 1st place. That was way too close, he thought to himself as he cleared Todoroki's team and flew back to the others. They had descended a bit without his wind abilities to help keep them aloft, and Aoyama was using his laser a lot more as Dark Shadow and Mineta's sticky balls continued to pursue them. "A few snags in the plan, but I think we should be okay now," he told the others as he landed. "I don't know if I can keep this up for another 7 minutes. Monami," Aoyama grunted. Before Midoriya could come up with an alternate plan to deal with the onslaught, he heard the fateful call that had disrupted a chunk of his adolescence. "You shitty DKU." Bakugu was rocketing through the air, using his explosions for a version of flight. Recipro boost. Midoriya looked the other way to see Todoroki's team was trying for the same ice ramp boost combination. Backup plan. The backup plan was pretty simple. Hatsum disengaged her boost boots, and the others fell to the ground, while Midoriya took to the air. It worked particularly well. Bakugu passed Todoroki's team in the air and snatched Ida's headband for good measure. But that was a temporary measure, as Bakugu turned in mid-air and began ascending towards Midoriya. "You're not getting away that easily." Midoriya flew away, thoughts racing. Kaken's flight is limited. He can only continually propel himself for so long before the strain on his wrists and gravity would win out. And the explosions meant he had to use a new one to change his trajectory. This didn't stop Bakugu like Midoriya thought it would, though. The two zigzagged throughout the stadium, drawing cheers from the crowd. "This is just like that movie you showed me," Valkyrie said, on the edge of her seat. "Forrest Gump?" Thor asked. Valkyrie and Loki both gave him looks of disbelief. "No, the one with the wizards, you dolt. You know, with the broomstick sport." "Oh right, Harry Potter," Thor laughed. Inko giggled as well. Loki sighed and rubbed his temples. "Why do I sit between the two of you?" "You better fucking get that nerd, Katsuki." Bakugo Mitsuki yelled from her seat a few rows down. "What a charming woman," Loki sneered. "A real Malfoy." "Get back here," Bakugo yelled. Midoriya turned in midair and shot a bolt of lightning at Bakugo. Bakugo's reflexes were in top shape, and he used another explosion to vault himself over the blast. Then Midoriya realized this would go right into the crowd and yelled, "Crap." He zoomed under Bakugo, just barely flying out of the way of an explosion, racing the lightning strike. He was able to get in front of Bolt and spin his hammer in front of it to absorb it. An explosion rang out next to him no sooner, as Bakugo snatched the million-point headband off of Midoriya's head. This was immediately followed by Bakugo grabbing Midoriya's face and letting loose a huge explosion, sending Deku towards the ground as he dropped Mjolnir in pain. He was almost eliminated, but Azui's tongue caught him a foot from the ground and pulled him back to their team. Deku coughed and rubbed soot from his face as he was placed back on their shoulders. "Are you okay, Karo?" she asked. "Yeah, he got the headband. But did the backup plan work?" Midoriya asked. Azui grinned and held up Bakuga's headband. "Yeah, he never noticed me grab it with my tongue after we all split up. Everyone was so distracted by your air stunts, it was a lot easier to defend it too." Hatsum laughed. Midoriya sighed in relief as the buzzer went off, signifying the end of the cavalry battle. With Bakuga's headband, combined with the other values of his team, they had slid into second place in the battle. That was quite a plan, Aoyama praised as Midoriya climbed down to the ground. "Well, it was like 3 plans," Deku admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "And I couldn't have done it without you guys." "Geez, I just barely was close enough to catch you." Zero sighed as he reeled Bakuga in with his tape. "Whatever, elbows," Bakuga laughed. "I got the 1,000,000 points." The 3 of his teammates cheered, but as the buzzer went off, Ishido did a double take. "Wait, Bakuga, where's your headband?" Bakuga slapped his own forehead to see it was blank as he was still holding Midoriya's headband. "What?" He turned around angrily and saw Midoriya's team. At his angered gaze, Azui waved Bakuga's headband at him. That shitty frog tricked me," he roared. "Dude, we came in first place," Kirishima said, hesitantly. "It's all good. Those goddamn extras should be eliminated," he yelled in Kirishima's face. Kirishima calmly wiped some of Bakuga's spit off his face. "Then you can eliminate them in the tournament. You know, the manly way." "Yeah, we're going to be the team to beat." Mina beamed. The words seemed to hit Bakuga as a grin slowly twitched his way onto his face. Even that seemed violent. "I'll get back at that shitty frog and that shitty Deku. May I have your attention, please?" The students and the crowd hushed as Midnight took the microphone again. "We have our 4 finalist teams, which will give us 16 total students to advance to the finals of the first-year sports festival." Midnight paused as the crowd cheered. "The finalists will be Midoriya, Izuku, Azuitsu, Hatsume, Aoyama Yuga, Bakuga Katsuki, Shiro Hanta, Kirishima, Ijiro, Ishido Mina, Todoroki Shoto, Yurariko Ochako, Ida Tenya, Kaminari Denki, Shinso Hitoshi, Monoma Nito, Kendo Itsuka, and Yaoyorozu Momo." The last 4 gave Midoriya confusion. He looked over to the team to see a general studies student. Shinso had teamed with Monoma, Kendo, and Yaoyorozu. But the other 3 looked completely confused by the situation as Shinso climbed down from their backs. Why did Momo team with those 3? From nearby, Midoriya could hear some of the Class 1B students griping about their lack of participation. But one girl with hose was trying her best to cheer up and classmates with broken Japanese. "But my friends can make do good with their fight style. They do big win." Midoriya saw the girl and realized she was a transfer student. For effort. He was snapped out of his eavesdropping as Hatsum slapped him on the back. "See, what did I tell you guys? We were a perfect combination." "Karo, that went pretty well," Azui agreed. "I think you pissed off Bakuga though, too," Aoyama warned. The 4 turned to look at Bakuga, who was shaking his fist at them angrily yelling, "You're dead, frog. And you too, DKU. I mean, that just seems like how he is every day." Azui shrugged, prompting the rest to laugh. "You're not wrong," Midoriya grinned. "I think they're about to announce the first-round matchups." The arena screen suddenly lit up with the bracket for the first-round matches. Midoriya Izuku versus Ida Tenya. Hatsum Mei versus Ishido Mina. Monoma Nieto versus Kirishima Ijiro. Todoroki Shoto versus Shiro Hanta. Kendo Itsuka versus Yaoyorozu Momo. Azui Thu versus Kaminari Denki. Yurariko Ochako versus Aoyama Yuga. Bakuga Katsuki versus Shinso Hitoshi. Midoriya couldn't help it, the nerves that went up his spine as he read these standings. He looked down and his eyes met Ida's. The taller boy just smirked, which just prompted Deku to grip Mjolnir tighter. His power was no match for Ida's speed. "Midoriya Izuku?" Deku turned to see Cementos had approached with Midnight. "Yes, sir? I've been discussing with the faculty, and I was hoping you could clarify something." Part of your quirk is to summon your hammer to your side? Cementos asked. Yes. Midoriya agreed, unsure of how else to explain it came with the title of godhood. By now, all 16 contestants had gathered in a bit closer to listen in. Very well, Cementos nodded. Contestants are to start each match without the aid of items, unless they are in support, of course. You must leave your hammer on the side of the field until the match begins. What? He objected. That doesn't make sense if I'm going to have the hammer anyway. Rules are rules, Cementos shrugged. If your quirk summons the hammer, you'll just have to compensate. Sir, Aoyama interjected, I am allowed to use my laser's gear. Is that not the same? Cementos shook his head. No. Without that, your quirk runs the risk of causing yourself great harm. It's considered necessary. It is not necessary for Midoriya to start with the hammer. Deku frowned but slowly nodded. All right, I understand. He turned to Aoyama and whispered, thanks. But as Cementos walked away, he could see the hungry looks he was getting from most of the other students. Momo, however, placed a hand on his shoulder as she approached from behind. I faced the same handicap, Midoriya. What do you mean? He asked, turning to face her. Well, it takes me time to create items, she frowned. Even if it's a few split seconds, it puts us at a disadvantage. Deku realized she was right. Her creation work was powerful but required a build-up time. His mind was already racing, thinking of quirks that could complement hers on a hero team, but he caught himself starting to mutter and snapped himself out of it. Ah, you're right. But your quirk is amazing. We'll figure something out. He smiled. Thanks, Vice President. You'll all have half an hour to prepare. Better start strategizing, heroes. Midnight said into the microphone. Cementos began leading the students to the 2 different waiting rooms backstage and advised, if you were about to face off against someone, to wait in opposite rooms to avoid any high tensions. But as everyone began to enter the rooms, Midoriya noticed Todoroki storm off down the hall. This gave him pause. Karo? Tsu asked, when she noticed he wasn't following her in. What's up, Midoriya? I think I'm going to take a walk, he lied, clear my head a bit. It helps me think better. Karo, she riveted, don't get too distracted, you're up first. He gave her a small smile. I won't. Thanks. Midoriya paced down the hallways that Todoroki had stormed though, trying not to be too loud so that he could maybe hear someone else's footsteps or voice. It didn't take long for him to hear what sounded like arguing from another hallway over. As he followed the sound, he recognized one of the voices as Todoroki. But the other voice was recognizable as well. Why? You've been holding back. Who is that? Midoriya thought, creeping towards the corner. It's my choice, said Todoroki, seething. The other voice have a laugh full of condescension. You're denying the power given by your birthright, Shudo. Birthright? This guy is talking like some asshole version of Thor. I can be the #1 hero on my own, father. Todoroki spat. With just my left side. That's his dad? Yikes. You can't deny me forever. You were born to be the #1 hero. We can finally take down All Might. Midoriya's curiosity got the better of him, and he snuck a peek around the corner. It took all of his self-control not to gasp as he is back around the corner. Todoroki's dad is Endeavor? Midoriya whispered to himself. 5 minutes to round 1. Midoriya Izuku and Ida Tenya to gates 1 and 2. That was Midnight's voice over an intercom. No time to process this, Midoriya gulped. It's showtime.